Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call a regular meeting of the Buckhannon City Council to order. Ask if you join me with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We'll respect the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On our agenda, we have Dr. Joe Reed from the Health Department.
Yes.
Sir, you're first.
Thanks for being first on the agenda. It's good to see so many people come out to the city council meeting and express their opinions, regardless of what they may be about. I come more as an informational piece than anything else to indicate that the health department is asked to include the e-cigarettes in the Upshur County Indoor Clean Air Act. The thinking is that several issues. One is that if people are using the e-cigarettes in public places where we have prohibitions with regular smoking, it's difficult to tell the difference and difficult to enforce. Second issue is that the e-cigarettes are not well controlled, or not controlled except for very minimally at this point. There are various and sundry things in them. I understand there's nearly 600 different products in the market, and the control of these is very limited, although there is proposal to increase that control. The third issue is that the concern of the nicotine, which is in many of them, but apparently not all of them, and the potential for causing addiction. We know that the addiction of nicotine is closely comparable to that of heroin, which we all think of as a bad drug. And it's very difficult for many people to break the habit once they've started. My personal argument is that the best prevention is don't start. And I have a form here if anybody would care to fill it out and return it to me. If you've been a user and have quit, tell me about how you did it and what the difficulties were. So if anybody's interested, have one. If you need more, let me know. Again, I respect your leadership in this issue of the e-cigarettes from over a year ago, I believe, and declaring that they would be forbidden within the city's area of control. If you have questions, I'll be glad to try to answer.
Any questions for Dr. Reed?
I have one. I've heard that e-cigarettes, they've been able to use them for marijuana. Is that true?
It's my understanding that they can load various things, including illegal drugs, in the cartridges. One of the issues that has been discussed is this a means for some people to who are sincere about trying to stop smoking, and up until recently what I've known is that this has been considered to be pretty much on par with the use of gum and the patches, nicotine patch. Yesterday there was an article in the AMA, the American Medical Association Journal, saying that some people had suggested that there was an improvement with the use of e-cigarettes who people were trying to quit. Again, there's a control, what else is in those cigarettes besides how many people who start and that becomes the basis of their addiction that might not have otherwise, is the balancing factor to that issue of some maybe trying to stop, which we recognize may work for some people. I think there are three big things to the use of tobacco products. One is habit. Now, how many of you got up and had a habit today from something you started yesterday? Not many people. Most people, it takes a period of time to develop a habit. The same is true of trying to break a habit. It takes time. One of the things I do is go to some of the schools and talk to the kids about trying to avoid the use of tobacco and talking to their families. And I say to them, remember that the habits that your parents have or your family have didn't develop most of the time overnight. Go to them, instead of throwing their cigarettes away, and instead of giving them a hard time about it, say, how can I be helpful? Is it carrying out the trash when I'm supposed to do it without having to be told 20 times and so on? The second thing that is a big factor with tobacco use is the addiction, which comes from the nicotine. And we know that that's, as I indicated earlier, a difficult habit to break, difficult addiction to break. The third thing that would be meaningful to many of you as parents is what I call the pacifier effect. Now, I suggested instead of smoking, you go get you a pacifier. Walmart will sell you one anytime you want it. It's what you do with your hands and what you do with your mouth. Those are, and I think in trying to break the habit, you have to address each one of those things separately. But again, I think the best thing is don't start.
Any other questions?
You're 100% right on. Absolutely, on everything. The
Well, that's
e-cigs,
unusual.
the e-cigs, to your question back there about being addictful or anything like that, when they're advertised in High Times magazine, I don't think that's a good sign.
It's a pretty gnarly act, for sure.
Yeah.
Joe, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Jeremy McGowan.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, guests, of which we have several, and I thank you. As everyone is very well aware, I am a very outspoken critic on the ALPRs, or automatic license plate readers, which are in use here in Buckhannon. However, I want to make a point very clear. I am not against the use of the equipment. I am against how it is used, and more to the point, I am against the database of information that it creates. I am not against the use of the equipment by our police. At a previous council meeting, Mr. O'Neill, who unfortunately is not here yet, asked a state police representative if the ALPR could be separated from the database. That representative sidestepped the question and never gave council a direct answer. Today, I have that answer for you and a proposal for a solution that I feel would make everyone here happy. In the editorial that I wrote in the Record Delta on Wednesday the 14th, I stated how I am now building my own fully functional ALPR system for use in my personal vehicle. I went on to explain how I could learn nearly anything about anyone by using this system and building my own database of who is who and where and when, by using this data that I captured with my system and cross-referencing it with open source data that I could get from the courthouse and other public bodies. This was to illustrate the potential dangers of the database that the current ALPR system in use here in Buckhannon can cause. I also pleaded in the editorial, again publicly and openly, for the council to stop the use of the ALPRs. However, I have learned something in the course of my research, and that is the answer to Mr. O'Neill's question. Yes, without a single doubt, the ALPR can be separated from the database and made to function without the invasion of privacy and without violating our rights. In the building of my own ALPR from open source software, I now have the ability to do exactly everything the police can do with theirs. The only difference being is that I do not have access to their pre-existing database, and I would have to create my own from scratch. But the database is not necessary for the law enforcement functionality of the ALPR. The police currently have access to their normal databases, weapons and NCIC, of stolen vehicles, Amber Alerts, and wanted persons. Their justification for the continued use of the ALPR is because it can search plates against that list and find child molesters, at-risk citizens, and fugitives. This has been stated by both the council in general and the police, along with the representatives of the Fusion Center, in speaking to the value of the ALPRs, and to that I do not disagree. This is a valid tool for that purpose. However, it is the capturing and keeping of innocent people's whereabouts on a constant basis, the non-existence of any state law governing the use of ALPRs here in West Virginia, and the violation of our 1st, 4th, and 14th Amendment rights by the creation, storage, and use of the database that I am fully against. It is this database the federal government wants to build, but it is also this database that is not necessary to the function of the ALPR in a positive manner for the police. The City of Buckhannon wants the law enforcement benefits of the ALPR, but in accepting this tool from the federal government, you have sold the privacy of we the people. You have, and you continue to violate our rights as you feed the Department of Homeland Security with information that is simply not necessary to create. And all of this is happening because you got for free a $20,000 piece of equipment so long as you continue to provide information on everyone here to the Department of Homeland Security. You spy on us in exchange for the ability to find a stolen car. And to this point, I do not believe a single citation has ever been issued from a hit by the ALPR in Buckhannon, even though tens of thousands of records of the people of this city have been sent to the Department of Homeland Security. Even the agreement that Matt Gregory signed with the Fusion Center states that he will install and use this on a vehicle driven by an officer that is, quote, aggressive and productive, quote, and that if the DHS isn't satisfied with the amount of data that it receives, it can remove the system from the city. I can build a fully functional ALPR with the capabilities of looking for license plates specifically on a hot list, finding sexual predators, identifying Amber Alerts, and everything the police want the ALPR for without creating a database of the location of every innocent the ALPR passes. And I can do it for under $5,000, hardware and software combined. My proposal to the city is that if you truly want to have the benefit of the ALPR in finding Amber Alerts, stolen vehicles, sexual predators, and other wanted fugitives, you can do so without having the Department of Homeland Security knowing the whereabouts of the citizens of Buckhannon, without opening the door to lawsuits for violations of our civil rights, without creating the image of a police state, and without alienating the citizens from the police who are supposed to protect and serve, not spy and report. If the City Council is interested in developing your own ALPR system with all the benefits and none of the civil rights violations, Mr. Shreve and I are willing to consult with the city in that endeavor as much as we possibly can. Mr. Shreve, the computer security expert who testified here previously, can explain to you how blissfully easy it is for the city to build and implement an ALPR without any ties to the federal government. In closing, I will add that in using other states as an example of what we should do here in Buckhannon, our city attorney has made it clear that what happens in other states is not legally binding here in Buckhannon. While that is technically correct, it is not an attitude in the best interest of our citizens. When ideas are created and acted upon in other states, it would be wise to evaluate those and take action based on that research and findings instead of attempting to reinvent the wheel and waste time. He also stated that the law in New Hampshire, which restricted the use of ALPRs, was going to be under review and possibly changed. Well, it was. The law was reviewed and a bill was introduced which would have allowed the use of the ALPRs only by law enforcement and allowed them to create the database and retain the data for 3 minutes. However, even that type restriction was overwhelmingly turned down. The bill was rejected, and therefore New Hampshire still maintains a 100% ban on the use of the ALPRs due to violations of civil rights caused by the creation and retention of data in the database. I have been in public opposition of the ALPRs here in Buckhannon since December of 2013. Nearly 7 months have now passed since my initial complaint. In that time, 6 states have created and passed regulations on the use of ALPRs by law enforcement, while Maryland, Illinois, Minnesota, Virginia, Tennessee, and Colorado are now considering bills that would limit their use and the retention of data in the database. Yet this city has done nothing to protect the rights of its citizens. I would like to now move that a motion be made to eliminate and declare illegal the use of ALPRs, both civilian versions such as mine and law enforcement, inside the city of Buckhannon until such a time where the ALPR can be placed into service that does not create a database on the people and does not send one shred of data to the Department of Homeland Security or any other state, federal, or private agency or company. Thank you.
We have Greg Blackburn.
Greg Blackburn has requested to go at the end. He is running late today.
Dorsey Shreve.
How do you sign in?
How did Greg sign in?
He asked me to sign in for him, sir.
Oh, okay. Did Dorsey Shreve here?
The last time I was here, I went over the database that the Department of Homeland Security has created using the ALPR information and how it was rife for abuse and created in a method that provided very little overhead and oversight as to the creation, retention, and use of this data. As you know, we've progressed in our discussions with the City Council, with the public, and with private corporations and legal counsel. We considered the creation of our own private ALPR system. In doing so, we found the ease in which the system could be created and the data could be prevented from being placed into a database. It is mind-blowingly simple, with very little software modification to systems that are freely available on the internet, that the code is open to review by anybody and everybody the world over to ensure that it is protecting the privacy of those that the system is scanning. You know, we could create this system and have it work with a hot list, you know, as the law enforcement have requested, and not provide any data upstream to any centralized location. No data retention, no centralized storage. One of the things that we've actually, looked into, and then, further investigated was the claims made by the representative of the Fusion Center that they limited the data retention here in West Virginia, not by policy, but purely because of financial considerations for the storage and retention of that period, longer than 2 years of the scans generated by the 49 ALPRs here in the state of West Virginia. However, that is a deliberate misrepresentation. Based on the highest resolution image sensors that the ALPRs use, the amount of data created by those could be stored for less than $3,000. So unless it's a situation like down in Charleston where an outside vendor sold $20,000 routers for public libraries that the buildings did not cost $20,000 for and were far over budgeted for, to say that storage was a consideration, well, not just the consideration, the deciding factor in their 2-year retention is categorically false. $3,000 to be able to store and retain in high performance, enterprise storage system, 4 years of data for, less than $5,000. It's disturbing that they would make that comment when actually, as other states have been implementing policies as to their data retention, and not just policies but laws. A lot have, gone from 4 years down to 2 years, down to 6 months, down to 30 minutes, down to 3 minutes, and down to absolutely no use of the ALPR systems at all. We feel that the decision for 2 years, because of the misrepresentation of the cost of storage being the prohibitive factor, we feel that it was an attempt to assuage the sentiment of the retention of this data that, oh, well, we don't need to keep it for 2 years because storage, we can't do it for longer because storage costs. In actuality, it's not storage costs, it's they're trying to play upon the sentiment that if you don't keep it for as long, it's somehow better.
Question about storage. How big of a hard drive would it take to store all
That's
this
what he's saying.
information on?
How big of hard
How
drive?
large of a hard drive would it take to store all the information on that they would gather for a year? Or
If you took, on average, the ALPR here in Buckhannon is storing, 6,000 hits a month, every 28 days. If you doubled that, multiplied it by the 49 ALPRs here in the state of West Virginia, and then put it out to 48 months, it would use less than 15 terabytes. Current hard drives are 6 terabytes in size, with about 5 of that being usable, so you could store it on 3 of them, which themselves would cost less than $1,500.
Question also for Mr. McGowan or Mr. Shreve, or maybe Chief Gregory, I'm not sure. We might have covered this before, I don't know. I haven't had clarity on it. What is being stored? In other words, what information? Is it like name and address entries, or is it more
What's
than that, like
stored,
records?
there are multiple pieces of data stored. There are 2 images. First, there is an optical image that you would see. It just looks like a normal photograph. Correct. The other is a reverse contrast infrared image of the license plate itself.
Okay.
And so that's what the software does. It's what's called OCR, optical character recognition. It identifies the plate, and then that then it stores that data. It pulls any other, it pulls whatever data from NCIC, what have you. The list that's downloaded to the system, daily or whatever schedule, and they have the system set to. So it stores, the plate information, it stores the time, the location, and any other data that's, that can be pulled from that database that's collected in those photographs. So optical character recognition isn't just limited to the license plate, but if you had any identifying bumper stickers, any window stickers, anything in the background of the photographs. People in multiple states have said, this is photographing children, this is photographing, it's getting a lot more because it's not discriminatory in what it's taking. It doesn't just focus in because it's a fixed focus camera that's set to take a picture at a certain distance. And it doesn't matter what else it catches in that field of view. Now they've said, it captures a very narrow field of view, but even on LSIG's website, the manufacturer of the ALPR you use here, the picture's relatively large, as far as what they can capture.
Doesn't that depend on the distance that the camera is away from the plate?
If it happens to be up on it,
What triggers the camera?
The camera is running 24/7, 365.
So it's a movie?
It's not recording, but when it recognizes the license plate, it then takes that, it freezes that frame and stores that photograph, both optical and infrared.
The license plate is what triggers that?
The recognition of a license plate, correct.
And so what is being stored then for 2 years is this image?
The optical image.
Councilman
Yeah.
Washington.
I'll tell you what, now we've been through all this, and I'm not going to let us go through all this again. We've heard about what the ALPR, I can't even say it, ALPRs do, what they don't do. We've had the discussion back and forth. What you gentlemen represent is quite different from what we heard from the folks from the Fusion Center. It's quite different than what we hear from our police chief. And I don't want to spend an hour here this evening on this. If you have a point you want to make that you haven't tried to make already, let's get to it and make it. I'm having a hard time following you because I'm not technically oriented. I think some other people in this room are having a hard time following what you're saying. I'm sure you know what you're talking about, but I don't dig your lingo, so to speak. And
Okay.
I'm not trying to put you down. Okay, I don't understand. And we've spent a lot of time on this. We've had 2 or 3 sessions at this, and it sounds like repetitive information to me. I think I said this to y'all before. I don't understand what you're talking about. Rich might, somebody else in this room might, but I don't. And I think there's a lot of people here who don't understand what you're saying.
Kenny, I think there's 2 issues from what I've heard from Jeremy and Dorsey, and I'm not comfortable with this process the way it has been handled, quite frankly. And, that's part of my problem. I think the 2 issues that I'm sort of hearing is that you don't like upstreaming, period. You'd rather keep it in the local law enforcement entity, and that if you want to eliminate the upstreaming to the state and the federal government, and that you also think there ought to be a reasonable timeline for when the hits are stored. New Hampshire said 3 minutes. Some people said 30 days, 2 years, 4 years. I guess I'll go back from the very beginning. I won't take very long, is that when you're sitting up here as a council person and you're trying to provide a safer environment for the residents within the city, this looks extremely attractive at the outset. But as you start thinking about it, I've become a person that has much more questions about all the information that the federal government is storing today on us. And so, Kenny, part of me thinks we ought to go revisit this. I know we've talked about it before, but I'm not sure. I want to hear from Matt, what is the real benefit? Does he think there ought to be a timeline? Does he think it ought to be upstream to the state and the feds? What are the benefits? How do you find a sexual predator in the first place? Are they on on some kind of license? They drive around in a car and we know who they are, so we want to see where they're driving around or parking and so forth. It's a very complex problem, and it's an emotional problem too, because I think we live in a society today where there's a lot of public distrust of government, and I think we've got to deal with that. So I'm sorry it takes so long to say that, but that's what I'm thinking. You don't want the upstreaming, and you want a timeline if we do it.
I have another question. Does this store the GPS location that the license plate was taken?
Yes.
Can Matt respond to what has been said so far?
Does it store the GPS?
Yes, sir.
I've got no objection to spending more time on this evening. We're all here. Mr. Mayor, it's not a
Well,
problem.
I don't mind spending the time. I don't want to rehash what we've been over.
I would like to
already.
ask Matt's opinion of a local system or what his thoughts are on whether that would be productive or how that might work.
I said before, I don't make decisions just haphazardly. When I make it, I've been the chief for this department for 10 years now, and when I make a decision for this department, I do so in earnest. I do so believing that it's the best for the department and in turn the best for the community. I look at this as the acquisition of a new technology. Sometimes I get the impression from no one in particular that I'm trying to sneak something in. And I certainly hope that's not the impression of council, and I certainly hope that's not the impression of the community. Again, when I make decisions, I do so for the best of the department and in turn the best of the community. I made a lot of decisions along the way in that regard. over the course of my 10 years as chief. If I was trying to hide something, I wouldn't have spoken about the LPRs, period. I announced it to council because I thought it was a benefit. I thought it was the acquisition of a good piece of technology that many other departments throughout the state of West Virginia has acquired and has since acquired for the same reasons, for the betterment of their department and the betterment of their community. And my definition of the betterment of the department is to be more effective and efficient and combating the problems, the real world problems that we have here in our community. I feel that this is a benefit for us. We have, on many occasions, had stolen cars, not just from our own community, but be brought here to our community from other jurisdictions. We've had fugitives. We just had one last week from Arizona end up here. Maybe they're connected to a vehicle. The one I speak of isn't, but maybe they are, and maybe this would give us an extra tool to be able to find them in our community. We have had, Mr. McGowan mentions us not writing a single citation with the usage of our LPRs, and that's true. However, we have had hits on our LPR in the last month or so. 2 examples. We had a hit last week on a stolen license plate. It ended up being from the state of Ohio, and in the state of Ohio they require 2 license plates, one in the front and one in the back. This just happened to hit on the one that was left on the vehicle it's supposed to be on, but it was doing what it was supposed to do. We also had another hit on a vehicle about a month or so ago because it was entered by a task force officer in another county. Task force officers deal with the drug trade, something that we have a very real problem with in our community. That vehicle was in our city, and the notification on it was to notify that task force officer immediately, which our officer did. No further action was taken as far as we know of because it wasn't an investigation that involved us as far as that goes, but we followed the directions as per the hit. We notified the task force officer that individual was in our community, and the license plate reader read his vehicle or his plate in a particular location here in town. We reported that back to the task force officer. Now, could that result in something else? Maybe. Maybe not. But those are some real world examples for how it's worked here in town. Another example where we've used it, we had a runaway juvenile about 2 or 3 months ago. We through our investigation, found that he was going to different locations and run around with different adults, and they were getting him drugs, they were getting him alcohol, and we found out the license plate numbers of the vehicles that he was running around in. So we entered a search for that license plate through our system to see if we happened to come across that vehicle, to see if we could locate or narrow down where this juvenile might be. We found nothing in the LPR system, but what's to say the next time a juvenile runs away, we might find or be able to at least narrow our search for another juvenile who's doing the same thing in a vehicle. It's a tool to help us be more effective for our community.
But how about, what's the benefit of you uploading it to the federal government?
To the federal government?
Yeah.
I can't answer what the federal government's doing. You know, as I said to you, the benefit of keeping the data, I just gave you the example.
Yeah.
If we were to come across the
I'm
car.
not questioning, I mean, there's 2 issues to me. One, uploading it to where you upload it to, and what are they using it for? And then what is a reasonable timeline if we use the system? And I can see where law enforcement may benefit by keeping it for a reasonable period of time. But when you say you don't know what the Homeland Security is going to use it for, that makes me uncomfortable, Matt. And if Dorsey's correct in what he read about our officer being aggressive and productive, that makes me uncomfortable too. I mean, I want you guys to be assertive and cracking down on drugs and so forth, but I mean, this whole discussion makes me uncomfortable. I'll be quite honest with you.
Let's,
I can give you my personal opinion on the federal government.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't give you my professional opinion because I don't work for the federal government.
I understand.
I've been a city police officer my entire adult life. And so I can speak for almost 18 years about what a city police officer does and the functions and the examples I gave you and how it benefits us. My personal opinion on the federal government is I believe that in the post 9/11 world, and I've spoken about this with colleagues, I've spoken about this with classes that I've taught on the collegiate level, that we live in a very different world now than what we lived in on September 10th, 2001. This is a very different world, a very dangerous world, especially if you travel abroad. And I happened to travel abroad prior to 9/11, and I'm sure it's completely different nowadays. And I was in New York City in 1998, completely different than I'm sure what it is now. It's a very different world that we live in, and to protect us as citizens, the federal government has to do things differently than what it did prior to 9/11. Now, I'm a person who, I'm a family man. I've got 2 children. We like to travel. We like to see our country. We traveled to Canada a few years ago. I've been to the nation's capital in the last couple years. I've flown in the last couple of years, and it is very different, as I'm sure New York City is, as I'm sure being in other countries is prior to 9/11. Do I have a problem with that? This is my personal take on it. I'm a professional because I don't work for the federal government. My personal take on it is if my family is being kept safe, if I can go to our nation's capital and go to the Smithsonian Museum and I have to go through these security checkpoints and my image has to be taken at on their video cameras, and how long do they keep those images, and if I have to go through security checkpoints at the border crossing at Canada, or if I have to go through security checkpoints and do extra security at the airports, if that keeps me and my family safe and free from the increased harm that we see in our world today, then I don't have a problem with that. Is the government spying on us? I don't know. I don't work for the government. Has it affected me in my daily life? No, it hasn't. I get on the internet, I surf the internet, I have a cell phone, I travel. I go about my daily life. And I feel that if our government's doing these things to allow me to continue doing that, then keep doing it, keep us safe. But it hasn't affected me in terms of invading my privacy or making me feel oppressed. I don't feel oppressed as an American citizen. I feel safe. That's my personal opinion.
I said I'd like to hear something different. Dorsey's going to ask you to surrender, if you would, please, and have a seat. And I'm going to ask Ed Henline come up. We haven't heard from Ed Henline.
Yeah, we haven't.
Chairman.
Sorry?
Say Mr. Blackman.
Yes.
I'm Mr. Blackburn.
That is Mr. Blackburn.
First off, I've lived in the city of Buckhannon for many years, and my family has been in this county all the way back to my great-great-great-grandfather. So I definitely have a vested interest in what goes on in this community. And one of the things I thought of, I tried to think about this logical, and I tried to think about this with reason, and I couldn't help but come to the conclusion that I needed to base it on a subject that probably we don't talk about, and that's the psychological freedom that we have. In this country, I could get in my car and I can just drive to California at a moment's notice. I don't have to tell anybody. I don't have to go anywhere, check in. I can go visit my family in Ohio. I can go visit family in Florida. I don't have to tell anyone or check in with anyone or worry about people knowing where I'm going. Now, to me, freedom is one of the most precious gifts that this country has given us. And this freedom is really represented by our vehicles. It really is, because all of us do it. We love getting in our cars. We love traveling these hundreds of thousands of miles of roads. We love it. We love being able to go to all these different places. And the testament is we have millions and millions of cars. So that's really a strong statement about how important freedom is to us, that we have that ability to do that. But what was bothering me about this was the psychological loss of freedom. I hold that very dear. It's very important to me. I want to be able to go down the street and know I'm not being monitored, not being checked on without a reason, without a good, solid reason for doing so. So the psychology of it to me was the most important. And what I started thinking was, we've had this situation where the government has proven itself to be not capable of keeping vast amounts of data to itself and keeping it private. They've already proven it several times. IRS scandal, NSA scandal, there's been many of them. So they've already proven that this is something they can't handle. So my thoughts on it, I feel like if I'm driving down the road, this is not going to be where they're going to stop. They're not going to stop with them on these cars. They're going to start getting this vast amount of data, and they're going to say, hey, this is great, we love this. Because they've proven themselves to do this already. We already know they've proven themselves to do it. We love this. You're going to see them on stop signs. You're going to see them on mailboxes. You're going to see them, well, you might not even see them. You might not even know they're there. They're going to couple them with facial recognition software. And I've studied that quite a bit. Almost exactly like the idea of taking a fingerprint. That detail, they can tell you from anybody else. And the technology's even getting better and better. So my thought is, the government's wanting to give this to us. Let's stop and make sure why they want to give it to us. Let's stop and make sure that they're not giving it to us to do what we don't want them to do, and that's track us, find out where we're going, to destroy that freedom that we have, that psychological freedom, which is more important to me than the actual freedom. Psychologically, I want to be able to be free enough so I can get in my car or go where I want without being monitored. And it's because I'm a law-abiding citizen and I'm free and I can do so. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ed. Gilbert?
Good evening, my name is Gilbert Valdez, and I am a counterterrorism professional. Apparently, it is my understanding that this topic has been covered at some length for some time. So what I want to present to you this evening is just a real brief synopsis of where this thing is going. This is a ALPR solicitation by ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It is dated February 12, 2014 at 10:38. It's a standard government solicitation. Solicitation number Hotel Sierra Charlie Echo Charlie Romeo 14 Quebec 0006. Notice type. Combined synopsis, solicitation synopsis. It's really, really technical. Bottom line with this is it was open to third parties. Which means there is no oversight. This is dated February 20, 2014. I imagine everybody's familiar with the name Janet Napolitano, yes? She's no longer the Secretary of Homeland Security. Is the council familiar with who is the new Secretary? His name is Jay Johnson. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson on Wednesday ordered cancellation of a plan by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency to develop a national license plate tracking system after privacy advocates raised concern about the initiative. The order came just days after ICE solicited proposals from companies to compile a database of license plate information from commercial and law enforcement tag readers. Officials said the database was intended to help apprehend fugitive illegal immigrants, but the plan raised concerns that movements of ordinary citizens under no criminal suspicion could be scrutinized. The stated reasoning behind this wasn't the outrage the announcement generated. Instead, officials are portraying it as some sort of rogue bid solicitation done with no one's permission that somehow magically appeared on an official government platform. The solicitation, which was posted without the awareness of ICE leadership, has been canceled, ICE spokesman Jillian Christensen said in a statement. While we continue to support a range of technologies to help meet our law enforcement mission, this solicitation will be reviewed to ensure the path forward appropriately meets our operational needs. This itself should be concerned. If ICE leadership can't even keep an eye on its all too helpful minions, one is forced to wonder how many other solicitations have escaped in this fashion and how many of those turned into actual ICE DHS programs. The concern with this is tracking, because this will go to a national database. That database is going to be held in Utah. We all know that we live in a technological age. Once that information is captured, the government will always maintain that. I've heard in just my brief time here about how long is it going to be maintained. Well, it doesn't matter, because you don't know who's going to be in office in 2020, 2025. And as a targeting specialist, what this does is it generates a pattern of life. So combined with social media targeting, i.e. Facebook, ALPRs, I got your pattern of life forever, cell phone exploitation. Now all we need, if Buckhannon truly wants to be cutting edge, is a drone. And I say that in jest, but there are law enforcement agencies that use that. So now, if you wanted to have increased efficiency, you could have 24-hour surveillance, 365. Is that good? It depends. Maybe in the Middle East. However, the cost benefit for this small community, even though we do have some major issues, is irrelevant to the bigger picture and the impact. Because we know, historically, West Virginia is key ground. That's our history. We have the technology corridor from Clarksburg and Morgantown, which houses several government entities and pioneers of facial recognition software. Now, I commend the police chief for wanting to get out ahead of the game. However, I think that the council should consider vision in this aspect, because the short-term gain does not outweigh the long-term interest of the community. Because this will be exploited, and these systems are easily hacked. You know, from a bigger national security standpoint, we just had recently the Chinese get kicked out of the country because they hacked all these systems. Now, without going into a geopolitical discussion, this is bad. So, we've done business here for a long time, successfully, without this technology. So, I believe it to be dangerous technology. Not that the application is dangerous, but the people that control that information. And it could be exploited. Thank you.
Tim Heater.
Thanks for hearing me. I just have two questions. One is the council is it generally agreed to that the license plate readers read and record the date, time, GPS coordinates, a picture of the license plate and vehicles of citizens regardless of if they are suspected of a crime or on private property, and that info is downloaded and stored and is retrievable by the police and the federal government for an undetermined amount of time?
That sounds correct.
Why do you feel...
One question I want to, this idea of federal government has come up several times. And my understanding from the briefing we had, it was limited to state government. Is that?
The state police keep the database in West Virginia. And my understanding is the database is only accessible if an agency has entered into an agreement such as we have with WIBIX and does so for a criminal justice purpose.
Sorry.
So it is retrievable by the federal government for an undetermined amount of time.
If they, speak to that a little bit more, Matt. How does the federal government get?
They would have to enter
information?
into the same type of agreement that I did with WIBIX. And if accessed, it would have to be for a criminal justice purpose. The database is only kept by the state police for a year. So anything after a year, it's
But it's downloaded to a federal government database that's kept for an undetermined amount of time.
that's not been disclosed to us, no. And they were here in address council months ago, and I think they were asked that. The response was they have to have the same type of agreement that we have with WIBIX, agreeing to the policies and the procedures for access. And if it's access, it has to be for a criminal justice purpose.
Okay.
Got a question right here.
If I may, the Fusion Center website, and we can all agree that the data goes to the Fusion Center because that is the agreement that was signed between the city and the Fusion Center for the storage of the data. If you go to the Fusion Center website, the Department of Homeland Security seal is displayed prominently in the upper right-hand corner of the website. I think it's arguing a matter of semantics on whether or not the federal government has access to this database. I am absolutely convinced, and I think it would be a travesty to think otherwise, that this data is not being accessed by the federal government, regardless of if they've signed an MOU with the keepers of the information.
Still trying to answer your question.
We're too many times, on too many occasions, we're confusing the West Virginia Intelligence Exchange with the Fusion Center. There were two agreements signed by the Buckhannon Police Department. The Fusion Center granted us the technology. We got the LPR from the Fusion Center. The other agreement signed was with WIBIX, and that's the agreement that I speak of, and that allows access to the database. And if we search the database, it has to be for criminal justice purposes. WIBIX maintains the database. That's the state police. The West Virginia Intelligence Exchange is the intelligence section of the state police. They maintain the database, not the Fusion Center.
Okay. Well, that's a question that I'd like for you to follow up on, Matt, and get a definitive answer from the state.
We have, and WIBIX was here, and he spoke to that directly.
My problem was, Matt, that they were here, but they didn't stick around to answer any questions at a particular time. I also understand that at one time there was somebody here from the Attorney General's office that I knew nothing about them being here until I believe Mr. McCauley mentioned it last week. I did not know that they were here. I don't think the Attorney General has given an opinion yet on this system. They were just here listening. But, you know, council, at least most of us on council, are late getting the information as to who was here, why they were here, when they're coming here, and why they left in such a hurry and didn't stick around for questions or for debate from other people. Now, they did come back and answer, but I believe I personally believe that they left and went away so they could get their ducks in a row when they came back to answer some questions, because I don't think they had the answers when they were here initially. That may be getting off.
Well, it is getting off topic,
here,
but they
My
did have the
basic point
answers.
was, this is storing this information regardless of whether a person is suspected of criminal activity or not, regardless of whether they're on private property or not. And I would like to know if you feel that is unconstitutional. That's just a simple question. Do you feel it's against my civil rights to search and store my information, location, and everything, whether I'm on private property, whether I'm suspected of a crime or not?
Ms. Sheeter, I feel that it's against your civil rights.
I would like to know how the whole council feels about it.
Your Honor, Mayor Davidson, Your Honor.
Thank you.
That's the first time I've ever called the mayor that in 31 plus years. There has not been a single court in the United States of America, state or federal, that has held that the use of ALPRs constitutes any constitutional infringement of our citizens. Not
And
one.
what-
Not
what-
one court.
But
Not
what-
one court case.
Wasn't there a Supreme Court decision that declared license plates? What was that?
Well, the case that was cited by Mr. McGowan last December, January, when we first started this exercise, was U.S. versus Jones. Mr. Jones was a murdering dope dealer, and the agents over there in D.C. went and convinced a magistrate to grant a warrant to allow them to attach a GPS device to Mr. Jones's car. While Mr. Jones was doing another drug deal, he got arrested and apprehended by the cops. His clever defense team then used this Fourth Amendment argument to have his subsequent indictment and conviction overturned. Went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and by a 5-4 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court held that the search warrant had been inappropriately issued, that Mr. Jones's conviction was overturned, and sent it back to the lower court. That's what U.S. versus Jones was all about.
But there was some else side, and I thought you emailed me that there was some kind of a court decision that declared that because a license plate is required to be displayed publicly on your car in every state in the union, that they're not protected.
Mayor, I've sent so many links to the council about this since last December. I can tell you that the National Association of Police Chiefs endorses LPRs. The National Association of Sheriffs endorses the use of LPRs. The United States Attorney General endorses LPRs. Now, that doesn't carry a whole lot of weight with folks, but that's the fact of the matter. And in fact, one of the senior assistant attorneys general came to Buckhannon and spoke with a number of us about the use of LPRs, including their agency's endorsement of the use of LPRs. I believe 25 of the 49 units right now are either on the West Virginia Turnpike or on state police cruisers.
Mr. McCauley.
So, yeah, the state endorses it. That doesn't mean that you have to endorse it.
Who did the representative speak to when he was here? How many members of council were asked to attend or knew he was going to be here?
The Attorney General asked to speak with Mayor Davidson, who was not here that evening. Mr. Clemens, acting as the chair of the meeting, met with them. I met with them. Matt Gregory met with them. Mr. Doss met with them. Mr. O'Neill arrived about 1:15 that evening, and Mr. Clemens recused himself, and then Mr. O'Neill met with them for about 15 minutes.
Was there any reason why the rest of council wasn't invited?
The Attorney General asked very specifically to meet with certain city officials. They didn't want to turn this into a circus, I think that was their word, and did not want to publicly address the issues. They wanted to satisfy city officials that there was no illegal or illicit purpose being associated with the use of the devices.
I can further speak to that too. The colonel of the state police didn't authorize him to speak yet publicly.
The Attorney General's representative?
The colonel of the state police did not authorize the representatives of the state police to speak publicly at that time. That's why they didn't do it.
Okay.
I made the arrangements after, and they the information that I gave council that night was information they briefed me on.
Chief, I'm not.
So I took notes and I came and shared it with you all.
I'm not asking about the representatives from the state police. I'm asking about the representative from the Attorney General's office that was here.
That was the same response that I got from him as well. He was not authorized to speak publicly. That's why I made the arrangements over the course of the next month after speaking with council that evening and brought the individuals back here minus the Attorney General.
But he was authorized to speak before other selected members of the city government, but not council. Is that correct?
I can't speak for them. All I know is they came and spoke.
David?
The three individuals from the state here that night did not want to address the public.
Good. I'm just at a, I don't understand why that there are 7 members of the council here and only, and none of us were invited to meet with these people. The people that he did meet with are not the elected government of the city of Buckhannon. Now, if
He
they
did ask to meet with me,
well, you're not the say-so in all of this, though.
but you and I don't speak for the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General wanted to speak with us. But let's pick this up a little bit later. And Mr. Heater, do you have any other questions? Or
I would like to state that I feel that because, I'm not suspected of a crime, and providing I could be visiting a friend of mine on private property in a reasonable expectation of privacy there, whether I have a license plate or not, and that is stored, I feel that's a violation of my civil rights. And I understand that they need these for certain purposes, but to store my information, why can't they not just go to a be on the lookout and that's it, and just use that, because that's what they need. And I just feel like it's a violation of my rights, and that's why I came to tell you that.
I want to speak to that. I think the issue that I had initially when Matt made his presentation was that the technology was going to provide us with a real ability to go out and get a hit. And my thinking was, when you get that hit, that's good for our city residents, that we're finding somebody or a stolen car. But I'm still somewhat confused as why do they need to have a storage system for a database? I mean, if you get the hit and you find the stolen car, within a reasonable period of time, or you find whoever's, the drug person or the sexual predator, whatever it is, why does all the other stuff have to go in a database? What's the point behind it, Matt? I don't understand that.
Mr. Thomas, is for investigative purposes. If I would investigate criminal activity involving a car 2 weeks from today, and I believe that car may have been in town committing a certain crime that I'm investigating, then one of the tools that I could use to help corroborate my suspicions of this criminal activity would be to search the database to see if it was in fact scanned at a particular location at a particular time. One of the examples I just gave was...
But we would only need that database locally. We wouldn't have to upload it anyplace else.
Well, I'll give you another example. We became aware of a individual stalking a nurse. The individual was from Grafton, and he was stalking a nurse. I don't know if he was involved in anything in Grafton, but I was aware of him being involved at Stonewall Jackson Hospital in Lewis County, that he was stalking a nurse, and it became to the point she feared for her life, the actions that he was taking against her. And so through the course of that investigation, the LPR database, not through our agency, but the LPR database was consulted. And it turned out that that particular individual had been scanned, his license plate had been scanned at a location here in Buckhannon. So that was information that was able to assist that investigation as to this guy stalking this woman and following her different locations.
Still not the fact.
That's the type of historical data that lends toward investigative purposes.
But it still wasn't at the federal level, though. It was at the local level and not gone on to the federal level. Did you have a question?
Well, I had a general statement.
Just a minute. I'll run the meeting. I know that this guy's been, but we're waiting to get through with Mr. Heater. He has the floor, and we're trying to answer his questions, and I'll run the meeting, please.
I'm pretty well done. I was just letting the discussion continue, but I just feel that's a violation of my civil rights, and I explained why. And if that information wasn't stored, I would feel differently about it. But me being a law-abiding citizen, going about my everyday, it raises concerns to me about all my information being stored and being sent home. And that's all I've got to say.
Now,
I had some commentary with regard to Mr. Heater's question and access to the federal database. The American system of law, if a thing is not prohibited by law, that thing is generally considered legal. Thus, in the absence of local, state, or federal law for the federal government to access a database, they are permitted to do so, and it would be wise to assume that they will.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
I don't know what your name was, but that was very well said. That's probably the most profound statement that's been made here tonight on this, okay? I did some research on this too, and I was looking up the ACLU, okay? And this is what they say. In society, it is a core principle that the government does not invade people's privacy and collect information about citizens' innocent activities just in case they do something wrong. Clear regulations must be put in place to keep the government from tracking our movements on a massive scale. As technology spreads, the ACLU calls for adoption of legislation and law enforcement agency policies adhering to the following principles. And those things I spoke about with Chief Gregory before the meeting started. And I think I feel confident in that, but I still believe that we do need regulations and laws placed in place within our state of West Virginia before we can start sharing this data that is being collected on a daily basis, because it's not right for the citizens of our community or our state.
Anybody else got anything to talk about with the ALPRs?
Well, I'd like to speak if I may.
Okay.
I am, I guess I'll take the podium here. Is there a trash can? First off, I've been holding this chewing gum since I came in.
There are no trash cans.
No food or drink allowed in here.
Oh, is it too late to swallow this thing?
Stick it underneath.
Give him a piece of paper.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thanks for taking the service.
Well, my name is Greg Blackburn, and I'm not even a citizen of this county. I'm actually from Raleigh County and from a little town called Daniels. But became aware of Mr. McGowan's campaign against the automatic license plate reader, and I volunteered to come out. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to speak. From what I've been able to read on the subject beforehand, and from what I've heard from people speaking tonight, it seems to me even more so that the purpose of this equipment is to aid law enforcement, but also in that process, it seems to collect everyone's whereabouts and their travel patterns, in case, as the lady just told us, in case that comes up later, as I believe, as what I've been able to gather, this man back here is the police chief. So, and he just mentioned his suspicion. So, what's the accountability for this information? Who is able to use it? What constitutes a worthy suspicion to then use this information? And as I'm sure everyone would agree, and unfortunately I've been able to find out myself, I'm not happy that I found this out, but and I'm sure law enforcement here would agree, that people with access to information don't always use this for the right purposes. And where is the accountability? Are these people in a position to control the accountability? The old saying, the fox in the hen house, or the fox guarding the hen house. So, moving on, as it's been said, we have seen people's information be used against them. The IRS scandal, for instance. And I think we'll see more of that as government expands its power. And that's always the promise, isn't it? We'll keep you safe. Let us have this, give us this, and we'll keep you safe. Really. That has proven the downfall for many. Now, I'm not speaking cataclysm here, but I do believe that everything tends to roll downhill and gather speed in the length of the hill and the grade of the hill. So, I don't think it takes an Orwellian scholar to see perhaps the big picture that all of this allows people in power to have. So, now just to close things off, in my opinion, a trained and professional police officer using their own initiative and their coordination with their other law enforcement should be able to, and I would, my confidence would be in them to use the existing parameters of law enforcement, such as the Be on the Lookout reports. I used to be a security guard and would have to listen to those as well. So, and of course, communicate with law enforcement when that actually passed by. But just to use a dragnet to assume that everyone is a suspect. And now when we find out a little something on this guy, well, we've already got his patterns over here, and see on this state he talked to this guy, and over here he drove over here, and he's parked here for 15 minutes. I think we got enough. Let's just go ahead and just wrap this up. Is that the world we want to live in? Is our safety that important that we're willing to give up all the rest? So anyway, I appreciate you allowing me to speak, especially since I'm not a resident. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have one question for you, if you don't mind.
Terry Mills.
No, go ahead. I changed my mind. I don't want to belabor it any longer.
You were asking the city attorney, Mr. McCauley, earlier today about the incident or the issue with the license plates being declared public because they're out in the open all the time. If that is the case, sir, and if you do in fact believe that the license plates are public information, why is the city still stonewalling me on my FOIA request for my own license plate information for the ALPRs if you in fact do think that they are publicly accessible information?
You asked for, I'm not going to argue that with you. You asked for information
on my license plate
about, and
yes, sir.
And it's not. You got an answer that was written by people that are smarter than I am. And
so what I'm understanding is it's not public information when it's convenient for government to not have it be public, but it is public information when it is also convenient for government to have it be public.
What your license plate number is, we'll let you know that.
I'm very familiar with what my license plate number is. I would like to know what the information is that the ALPR
And I know what
has
my
for
license
me.
plate number is, and I know about all my own personal information associated with that. But you got your answer to your FOIA, and I think we were.
Well, the answer to my FOIA was that my FOIA was denied based on a policy letter and not based on law.
Right. Well, we can argue that. Anybody else got anything about ALPRs here this evening?
I'd like to hear Tom O'Neill's opinion.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
On what in particular?
Well, I mean, what do you think about the whole issue? I mean, what is your stance as far as everything you've heard tonight?
Why you saying
every time?
Because Tom is an attorney and he's asked some relevant questions before.
Well, we've talked about, we've discussed this this is probably the fifth meeting that we've kind of delved into this topic in depth. And I think at every meeting I've said more or less the same thing. I have a great deal of concern over the potential for abuse of the database information. However, what we have are fears of abuse versus real life instances where it's been a benefit. So how do you weigh that in the balance? When it comes to the license plate readers themselves, there is no, and we've said this before, there's no state law on this at all. There are no administrative rules that have been put out by any state agency on this at all. And Jeremy, just following your Facebook, you have one of these yourselves.
Yes.
And you've deployed it.
I have.
So we have something that's perfectly legal that is used by public agencies and private individuals without any violation of law, that is used by repossession companies, banks, down the line, and private individuals in instances, and public law enforcement agencies. So we've got something that's perfectly legal, that there's no law against their use, but we're trying to say that we're going to prevent the Buckhannon Police Department from using one, something that's otherwise perfectly legal. And that's why I feel like we're arguing this ball is in the wrong court. And this is a matter for the state legislature to deal with. And I was just down with them this week, and I brought it up again to folks down there. And I hope that they will address this. We just came through a campaign, and during the campaign, I was very public about supporting the status quo until either state law changes or we have documented instances of abuse of the database. And I haven't, and neither of those things have happened yet. So my feeling is to maintain this status quo until something happens that demonstrates why we shouldn't have this. And believe me, or not believe me, whatever, but I am extremely sympathetic to the concerns about the database.
And you've said that previously.
Yeah, I've said that all along.
I mean, I think that's what...
But we don't have instances where those fears have been vindicated. But we do have instances where the benefits, the claimed benefits have been...
The reason why I asked you to comment, you said pretty much succinctly what I think a lot of us feel. And I have real strong reservations about the database. And I do have an issue with that.
All the benefits that have been gathered from this system have been gathered from the active numbers, the active license plates that are in the system. In other words, if you want to catch a criminal, his license plate has been put into the system. There have been those successes that I know of where the passive part of it, the gathering of the license plates of the innocent people, has proven to be any benefit whatsoever in any great accord to what it was designed. There may have been a few instances where through some bit of luck or something, they have found somebody that's license plate that has been here, and here. But over the time period that this system is designed to store, there's no benefit to the passive numbers. The benefit is all to the active numbers that are there, and that's where we're getting our good parts of it. And I object not to that whatsoever. But I don't see, Tom, where there's been anything at all beneficial through the passive storage.
I just don't think that's correct. I think when we had the individuals here from the state police, they talked about, and two come to mind in particular. That murder case in Louisiana, where they found the guy who murdered the individual whose job was to go around and restock ATMs. And they had, the case had gone cold, and they ran the victim's plate, and they got a lead that found him the murder.
I said there were a couple.
You said there were none.
No, I said other than a couple.
Okay. Well, anyway, and then there was an incident in Charleston where a carjacking victim was found.
Yeah,
anyway, but the point. But here's the broader point for the issue that is before us today. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that you make we get rid of these things from Buckhannon. All right. Well, what happens if the sheriff's department installs one in their vehicle? There's nothing we can do about that.
No.
And what if? Okay, so the same thing. So this happens again over at the county commission.
Well,
the sheriff. No, hold on. Let me finish. And then the sheriff's department says, okay, well, we're not going to have them on county cruisers either. And then the state police say, okay, well, we're just going to put them on state police cruisers. And then there's nothing the city or the county can do about that. And we're right back here exactly in the same place where we are. That's why this debate is not. It's not for this body. It is for the House of Delegates and the state Senate and the governor to decide as a matter of policy.
But it actually can be taken here, and it can take the lead, it can influence policy up the chain, and it can help protect the privacy of our citizens.
I'm not comfortable with the city of Buckhannon, the Buckhannon Police Department, being used as a public relations tool to get rid of these things.
And what about the people of Buckhannon that aren't comfortable about having their information kept, maintained, and stored? Where do we fit in?
My whole point is, no matter what we do here, that might not change.
But it might if we do something.
Yeah.
Our forefathers,
And we're still making the same argument. Let's have some facts here.
when our forefathers started this country, Tom, they did not wait around for the people in England to give them permission to do so. We have to start someplace. It's really clear that you don't start at the top of government and change things coming down. You have to start on a local level to change things that you perceive as being wrong. I perceive this as being wrong terribly against our Fourth Amendment rights, and probably a couple of others also. But we have to start someplace, and if you don't start someplace, then who's going to take it on? I mean, what if we do nothing?
I think there are plenty of people in this room that take it on.
Well, I like to take it on right now on a local level and then work our way up, let the news media catch it and go with it, and take it to the national level. If we do something here, perhaps the legislature will understand. If we do nothing, then we're just standing around with our heads in the sand, letting things go on as they have for years and years and years, and expecting that, as George Orwell said in 1984, Big Brother's going to take care of us. And guess what? Big Brother's here.
Ron, I take issue with you again. This is the 5th time we've taken this on.
You're right.
And
It is.
if taking it on means agreeing with you, then I've been taken out a number of times.
Mr. Mayor.
Let's keep one at a time. Lady in the door.
Thank you. I just had a couple of thoughts about it. Now, we have, I don't quite understand home rule completely, but doesn't that mean that we have the ability to stop? What?
We're talking about ALPRs.
Right, which
Okay,
means that
all right.
we can decide to do or not to do something as long as we're not mandated to do it. Isn't that what it means? No? Okay, I'm seeing heads nodding. So, but my point is that the point was made that the law doesn't specify against it. And the law doesn't necessarily specify for it either, right?
Let me answer your question.
So we can make that
Does this body have
decision.
the right to stop using this? Yes. We can stop using it.
Mr. Mayor, everybody here that has spoken up has been an objection to the use of the ALPR.
Let me see. Terry?
Everybody spoken up has, but DHS is not the enemy. The government's not the enemy. Look at what's their mission, is to protect the U.S. citizens. If we give up a few of our liberties to protect ourselves, who cares?
Jefferson, who are you to surrender my life? I care.
Jefferson said those who would sacrifice a little bit of liberty for temporary security deserve none.
Sit him down. This will not happen. Next time, you're out. Now, we've listened to you, and we'll listen to you, but we're going to maintain calm order in this meeting.
Mr. Mayor.
Terry.
That was basically it. It's post 9/11. It's not the same place it used to be. I don't foresee the U.S. government as being against us. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like they're talking about some foreign government spying on us, trying to come and get us. So that's all I have to say.
Have you not heard about Edward Snowden?
Well, I think we've got a couple of those in this room.
Well, Mr.
Let me ask one question. Of those who oppose this and are residents of the city of Buckhannon, would you please raise your hand? Residents of the city of Buckhannon. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thought you lived out there.
Not a resident, Mr. Mayor, but I am a very active member of this community.
Residents of the city of Buckhannon.
I can campaign in the city of Buckhannon.
I understand. But, you know, you're asking a city issue here. And we've been very, very open to listen. I've always said, hey, you know, I know you don't live in town. I've had people say here from this council table, well, they're not a resident. I said, I will let them speak, and I'll let you speak here in just a minute. But you got 2 or 3 people who are saying, I think this is a bad idea. And we got a chief of police and 9 police officers that are saying, this is a great idea. And these are people who use it. And we're the council, we have to make a decision. And we made one. We made one.
Yeah, but Kenny, I will say, I didn't raise my hand, but I don't.
You have concerns, I understand.
I don't like the way it's been implemented,
Yeah.
okay? And it makes me uncomfortable. And Matt, I don't think you try to pull anything over, wool over our eyes at all. I think you had good intentions, and I think, when I heard about it first, my first thing was, I have kids and grandkids, and I want to have a safe society and a safe place to live, but I do have some issues that we've discussed this evening. I'm not sure what the answer is. I like the automatic license plate reader with a certain type of restrictions. I don't even know what those are. It's a very complex issue. Tom is correct. The state legislator ought to deal with it. You ought to have uniformity within the whole state of West Virginia. Each municipality can probably do what they want, but I don't know what to say is the right answer right now.
I'm even willing to officially go on record and request them as a body to deal with this.
I think we
one
ought
way
to
or
do
the
that.
other.
I think that's a great
I'm more than
idea.
comfortable with sending that message.
Send that message loud and clear.
Got a gentleman here who.
Sir, I'm a resident of Upshur County, and I've served 14 years in the Army Reserves and 14 months deployed in Iraq. So I'm aware of terrorism and what it can do to not only the U.S., but what it does abroad. And as I travel through downtown Buckhannon, I feel safe with the city police officers alone patrolling the streets without the use of this automatic license plate reader. And Mr. O'Neill, you had mentioned something about no rules or regulations or guidelines for this. But what's to define abuse if there's no laws in place to specifically?
Well, my point is there should be laws dealing with this.
And as a citizen, resident of Upshur County, I think it's a bigger issue that we handle this and nip it in the bud now, because there is nothing to define abuse as far as the data being sent upward or being misused by other bodies outside of West Virginia.
I don't think that, well, okay.
Well,
This minute, Dave.
As a member of the community in the city of Buckhannon, when I raised my hand, I'm not against, because it was a yes or no, basically.
Yeah.
I'm not against the use of them at all. I'm against the way they're being used. That's my problem with it. And I would like to say that, although I understand what Mr. O'Neill's saying, I don't agree with the idea that we just have to wait and see what the state does or see what other agencies do, because this is our community. So, discussing it in our own community, since it's being used in our own community, it is a valid point, and it is a valid subject to discuss and decide whether we're going to use it, looking at all sides of it. And it is valid that the citizens be able to voice an opinion on whether it be used or not. I think that was the whole issue.
Thank you.
Well, just as a matter of clarity, if I can, Kenny, if you
Please.
I don't think we should, I'm not advocating that we just wait around and just I'm all for putting the pressure on them to address this issue. My point is that what we do could have no effect whatsoever. And what are the costs associated with that? I think it's just that. I think this is something an agency from another jurisdiction, from whether the county or the state police, could use these things within the city of Buckhannon just as easily as the Buckhannon City Police do, and we're going to kind of slap them down, and then we're exactly in the same boat that we were in, before we took any action whatsoever.
We're not in a position to do anything about the county use of the state police.
No, but the issue is the issue is the community, and we don't have complete control over what happens in the community. And we need to weigh that in our decision.
Well,
you bring up
there's
technology,
48,
but
there's 48 other automatic license plate readers, which we can get viewed by also. Am I correct on that?
there's a bunch.
Well, there are a number, I don't
Drive up and down 79.
some of them are stationary. you
I've
know,
probably
some of
got
them are
hit 3 or 4
stationary.
times today.
But I do think, Tom, your suggestion that we send a letter to the
I'd do it, I'd
governor,
take
the
a,
state legislature, and attorney general, I think as a council, we ought to ask the mayor.
well, I've talked to people in the
Ask for
Attorney
some
General's
guidance.
office about this, and their response is, there's no state law on this.
Right.
Why don't we do that?
Let's let Mr. Heater, he's,
You asked if anybody was a resident of Buckhannon. I am not a resident of Buckhannon, but I'm a business owner, and I travel to Buckhannon, and I spend my business money in Buckhannon.
You're part of
And
our
I
community.
pretty much take offense to not being counted as a member.
I was
That's
just
my
making a
opinion,
point.
doesn't matter. I took my time to come here to do this.
I apologize. I have always said we are a community, and when we start drawing a thick black line around the city of Buckhannon and closing off to everybody else, we're making a big mistake. We are a community, and that's why we're willing to listen to you, okay? We're willing to listen to you. But the point I make is that it's our city police department's using it because somebody else brought in the county and the state. How many citizens of Buckhannon have come forward to oppose what we're doing? And it's not very many. It's not very many.
It's more than's been here in favor of it.
It's true.
So what do, let's do a
I just have a
letter.
question. Have any of these people gone before county commission and asked that the sheriff's department quit using them?
They don't have
They don't
them.
have them.
They don't have them.
They don't have them.
Have you asked the state police quit using them?
They don't have them
They don't
locally.
have them in this county.
You're sure of that?
Yes. Not in this county. Buchanan Police Department is the only one that uses them.
Have you tried to get any of the other state police in surrounding counties? I mean, they could be gathering your information and watching you.
They are, but I work from the bottom up instead of from the top down.
Yeah,
I
let's,
try to follow the chain.
Yeah, but what if you go outside?
Let's have a conversation here, please. If y'all want to have a conversation, go outside, that's fine. Back there.
My concern is, as a landlord, and there's several of them in here,
Yeah.
we can.
Because we have another issue we need to get to.
Well, we can be at the wrong place at the wrong time. A drug deal can be going down right in front of our eyes and we won't even see it.
Yeah.
It can be around the corner of the house. We are associated with that drug deal if it goes down.
Yeah. I'm going to give this 3 more minutes. Rich?
Thank you.
How do you handle that issue?
Well, hopefully you're not at everyone.
Well, don't plan on being at any of them.
I've got a couple of questions for the chief, and I'm looking at this issue from an entirely different light than everybody that's spoken here, I think, so far. Chief has used in earlier presentations the term force multiplier. And I've grown to identify what that is. I also heard a news article tonight that said since 2012, 2013, we've had an 85% increase in meth labs in this state. That's bad. I see this as a tool. This is, to me, because I'm a technology geek, is not doing anything that we could not do by hand, except faster. Chief can't do it. You can't do it when you're driving a car. You can't talk on your cell phone. You can't get out your note and your notepad. But if we put 2 people in every car, or 3 people in every car, or 4 people in every car, we could drive around and everybody look for a license plate, take it down, write down what the address is, take a photograph, because that's legal, whether the car is parked on private property or not. As long as you're on public property, you can take a photograph. So we could create this database with people. All we're really doing here is engaging a piece of technology. Now, I like technology. A lot of people don't. That's okay. But all we're doing is changing it from somebody that could sit there and write all this stuff down, gather it together, run it through the copier, put it in envelopes, ship it off to the state to an electronic high-tech form. Now, I got 12 grandkids, 4 kids, thank goodness. 12 grandkids, they come to visit me. We take them to the park. I want them to be safe. I want to know that anybody else that might be at the park that's sitting there with their car, that might get scanned by a police officer that comes in and drives around. Or somebody that just spray painted the heck out of the city park is caught. Now, I'm sorry we get all these other plates in the process, and you might be next to that drug deal, which I hope doesn't happen, but it might. I might be there too, who knows? But the problem is, this is just, to me, a force multiplier. It makes our police department more efficient. Now, some of the database stuff, I agree with you, but that's not us. And you gotta put these license plates up in some kind of a database that everybody that has these things can access, otherwise they're not really gonna do you much good. If we take that list of license plate numbers and addresses and photographs and stick it in an envelope and stick it in the safe downstairs and lock it up, Bealington's not gonna know about it. Elkins is not gonna know about it. Charleston's not gonna know about it. We're only gonna have our own little database. The whole idea of databases, whether we like them or not, is to be able to share that in a wider room. I think they're great. I think we need it, if nothing else, to help deter individuals that have criminal intent from coming to Buckhannon. I see it more as a deterrent than anything else, and a force multiplier. But that's my take.
Okay, one last comment, and then we're going to quit this. Christine?
I apologize, because I didn't come here to speak on ALPRs, but I agree with pretty much everything that everyone is saying. We do have a problem with people accessing our information and using it in a negative capacity that it wasn't meant to be used by that program. Most of you guys know I grew up in law enforcement. I cut my teeth on police whistles. I didn't get in trouble in high school because I had everybody in the department following me around because of my dad. When he moved to Lewis County, I had 2 counties following me around. I hate that Matt feels that we as a community don't trust him, because we should, and we should make sure he knows that we do. Because these guys are the ones who do have our best interests at heart. They're out there, they have a passion, because they don't do it for the pay, and they don't do it for the glory, because most of the time someone's angry with them. These guys are doing it for us. The problem we have is when it gets beyond our community and we don't have a say in what other people are doing with our information. And that's where you, as a council, have a responsibility to protect citizens and to find a balance for giving them the tools that they need, because they have to have these things, and protecting your citizens. It can't be black and white anymore because of the age that we live in. It can't be. And you have a responsibility that if you follow through and allow these programs that these guys have to have, then you also have a responsibility to follow through and find out what's being done with that information. And if it's being used wrong, you have the responsibility, as our spokespeople, our elected officials, to take whatever you have to do, whatever steps you have to do to fight those people for us. And to make sure that these guys are doing everything to keep us safe.
Thanks. Very well said.
Okay, that's the amen on this thing. We're going on now.
Excuse me, sir. Mr. Mayor, I'm scheduled down later in the agenda on the use of ALPRs. I'd like to go ahead and do my thing right now at this minute instead of later on. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Good. I have a statement here to read that I was going to read before and didn't. It says, I realize that the automatic license plate reader that has been recently given to the Buckhannon Police Department by the Fusion Center as the agent of the Department of Homeland Security is an instrument which could be very useful in the apprehension of persons who have either been shown to have broken the law or are suspected of committing crimes that would result in having their vehicle license plate being placed on a BOLO alert for local, regional, state, or national distribution. However, I believe there to be no legal reason to have an instrument that routinely and without exception records every license plate encountered instead of just those that are on the BOLO request. I believe the ALPR could be programmed to only detect those license plates that are designated as BOLO plates. I understand that all license plates encountered are being stored for periods of time that varies by jurisdiction, up to as long as 5 years. I object to and can see no legal reason for these license plates that are not on a BOLO alert to being stored for any period of time, excepting that if the ALPR has not been reprogrammed to recognize and store only targeted license plates, that all other license plates be removed and erased from any computer memory or database in which they may have been stored within a time period not to exceed 30 days. The Department of Homeland Security has admitted to giving these ALPR systems to various local, state, and national law enforcement agencies for the sole purpose of collecting data on the citizens of the United States. Foreseeing this collection of data as a potential violation of the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution and the potential of litigation against the City of Buckhannon and its police force, I hereby move that the Buckhannon Police Department not be allowed to utilize the ALPR system until such time that it can be shown that the ALPR has been reprogrammed to recognize only those license plates that are on a BOLO alert, or that the license plate numbers not related to a BOLO request have been deleted, erased, and removed from any and all computer systems that may have stored such data within a time period not to exceed 30 days. And that is my motion, and I present it now for a second.
Let me ask a question first.
Yes.
Matt, can you do that?
Can I distinguish the system from
Just a minute, let's maintain the integrity of our meeting, please. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
The motion's been made and seconded. Now, if you want to discuss it, we can do that.
All right. I'll ask the question again. Matt, can that be done?
Let me make sure I'm understanding your question. Can I distinguish simply scanning plates for hits as opposed to the storage of data?
Yes.
No, sir, I cannot. I do not have that type of control over the machine itself.
Okay. So can you limit the storage to 30 days?
No, sir, I cannot.
Okay, Matt, you cannot do it. Can it be done?
That would be a question that I believe has to be asked of the state police, and I believe has been asked of the state police. I can't answer that question. I don't control the database.
Appears to me we have a motion on the floor that is, again, refer back to what Tom O'Neill said earlier. This is not an issue that we have control over, other than to say we're going to use it or not. And I think, given the scope and breadth of his motion, I would certainly recommend that we vote against it, because it's not something we could effectively do anyway.
I'll withdraw my second, but make my own motion.
If you've withdrawn your second, we have a motion on the floor
The motion needs to be withdrawn first, and then the second needs to be withdrawn.
I'm withdrawing my second.
I think the second goes first. Is there another second to the motion? Then the motion dies for lack of a second.
And I have a motion.
Okay.
And I'm doing it off the top of my head rather than having prepared. I think the council, we ought to, as a body, and I would probably ask our city attorney and also Tom Neal to draft an appropriate letter on behalf of the entire council and the mayor to have the state legislature really take this on their agenda. I think we should copy the governor and the U.S. attorney, our state attorney general. And I'm very uncomfortable when Matt has said, and it's not your doing, Matt, when he shared with us that neither the chief official of the state police nor the attorney general wanted to make any comments publicly. So essentially what we would do, we'd keep the automatic license plate reader as it is, but really push the legislature to make some laws regarding this whole process.
Okay, let me comment on that and make a suggestion to this council. I have lobbied the state legislature for years, for decades. Some of you have also done so. If you're trying to get a bill introduced in the West Virginia legislature and you represent the city of Buckhannon, every legislator I've ever talked to says, what does the West Virginia Municipal League say about that? The way to do this is to get before the legislative committee of the West Virginia Municipal League and have them advance a bill. You won't get a bill if we do it. You won't get a bill if you do it. I've had that phone in my face different times, and I've been an active participant in writing law and getting it passed. But it always came through the organization. When I was working in vocational education, it was the same way. They want to know what your organization. They're not going to take a rogue. I had a guy call me a rogue one time, and we went to the organization. And you can get it done. That's the proper way to do it.
Mr. Mayor, that is a correct approach to go about it. I too have been involved in legislation and lobbying the legislature and testifying in front of their committees. I also know that 80% of the bills that are introduced never make it past the stage going into to have a chance of coming out. I believe that if we would pass this motion tonight, it would have a better chance of getting through to the municipal league because we have taken an action, and now let the legislature go through and decide what they want to do to either endorse our actions or to correct our actions to something as opposed there. Let them know that there has been an action taken. Not that there are some people that want to do something, but that have done something, and let them act on it from there. That's just my viewpoint on that.
Yeah.
I think that's
I don't know whether we have a motion or not.
Yeah, I did. I made a motion, and you know what?
Let me finish what I was saying about the process. And the West Virginia Municipal League, the legislative committee will ask for a resolution of this council, a resolution to support a bill. That's their process. So if we had a resolution drawn asking for something specific, I mean, it's got to be more than just take a look at it. You're going to asking for some kind of regulation relative to these ALPRs or some kind of law. And your motion is what, Dave?
I think I'm going to have a stroke here. Well, I have to, let me say something before I say what the motion is. You know, I agree with everything Rich said. He really articulated it very clearly. Christine, you did the same thing. I mean, the frustration is, this is a force X, whatever you want to call it, Rich.
Force multiplier.
Force multiplier. I mean, that's great, and I think it's something we need to do. I'm concerned when Matt says he really doesn't have control of the process in some ways. You know, he can't adjust or adapt the way things are done because it's not in his hands totally. And I think that's frustrating for all of us sitting up on this council. The resolution would be, I can't give you one right now. I'd have to figure out my motion.
I think your motion was to have Macaulay and
Tom.
Rich, what did you write down?
Move us to draft a resolution to present at the next meeting.
Have a resolution drafted for the next meeting for consideration of the council. That's the motion.
It seems to me we wanted to accomplish two things. We want to get the bad people off the street with this technology, and it does help that. But at the same time, we want to protect our citizens for, I don't want a database in there for 5 years for people.
There's a TV show that's on. I don't remember the name of it. Does anybody know what the name of the TV show is where they've got everybody's on camera all over the world and they know who you are, where you are, and a computer spits out a number and that person's going to be in danger of what? Person of interest, yeah. And
It's Buckhannon City Council.
well, it could be, but that's a pretty good
Yeah, well, let's don't get too
thing
careful.
right there.
We have a motion.
I would second.
We have a motion by Dave
Councilman
Thomas to direct the city attorney with the assistance of Councilman O'Neill to draft a resolution relative to these issues and have it ready for our consideration at the next meeting, which is June, first Thursday in June.
And I'll be willing to help do
And
it.
we have a second from Councilman Waltz. Further discussion on the motion?
What do you guys want this resolution to say?
Yeah, well, that's what I said.
I mean, I could envision it saying that, that we are calling upon the Municipal League and the legislature to craft legislation to address privacy concerns, the length of time that data is stored, and I would welcome input from all concerned parties on what this resolution means. Short of calling for an outright ban on the thing.
It's almost like a rehash of what this means.
Why don't you just give them my copy of the motion and let them work from there?
The resolution to the Legislative Committee of the West Virginia Municipal League to sponsor legislation, da-da-da-da.
All right.
And I have a second, and I'm going to call for question. All in favor, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I would like to have just for the heck of it, a roll call vote, please.
It was unanimous.
Was it?
All opposed?
No.
Okay. Show his name as being opposed, and the rest of us is yes. Okay.
Because I think we are putting the problem further and further away.
Yeah. Well, it's time for our department and board reports. Michael, please.
Okay.
Take a 5-minute recess. Call a meeting to order. See if we can.
How much is yours worth?
Jody Light.
It's like, hey, after all that, it's now Michael. Give me a break.
Fellas, will you excuse it? We'll call meeting to order. Go ahead, Jody.
I think, does everyone have council have the little one-pages?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Those of you who don't know, I'm representing several of the landlords left, but some of them left. We're talking again about the proposed meth ordinance. I guess it's changed now to 381. Basically, again, thank you very much for letting us speak at the last meeting and the 2 shorter meetings we had recently. We still have some unanswered questions. Number 1, and there's not very many of them. Will not be 2 hours. With the added responsibilities of the zoning officer in these, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. In these cases, do you anticipate imposing any additional fees to the landlord or the landowner associated with the city's new ordinance? And I go back to, I think it's on page 3, and I've got my notebook over there. It mentions that it gives the city zoning officer additional abilities to make additional recommendations. I think it says administrative recommendations. But basically, do you anticipate, looking at this thing at this point, levying any kind of fees because the zoning officer, whoever that may be, will have additional responsibility? That's a question we have.
I'd say no.
That's not the intention.
Okay.
Can I speak to that just briefly?
Please.
Chapter 8, Article 11, Section 3 of the West Virginia Code. In the following enumerated cases, the action of a governing body shall, that's mandatory, except where otherwise provided in this code, be by ordinance. And the very first paragraph of 811.3 is levying taxes or providing for the collection of fees of any kind. So it would have to be done by ordinance if you were going to do something like that.
Require another ordinance.
It's not contained in this one.
Well, the reason I brought it up is that,
You're looking at section where it's
yes,
to allow the recorder to,
zoning officer has they can present additional recommendations to city council without a public hearing or other meeting to was it on page 3? I'm sorry.
operational rules.
Yes.
Administrative rules and regulations.
Yeah, and they could do that without public hearing. They could come to council at a regular meeting. So that's just a question. They may say, gee, I'm really busy with this, with those 5 meth arrests, and I need, we're going to levy fees. Okay, so you do not feel that's probably going to happen. This is maybe a crazy one, but it actually came up recently at a forum. I think Mr. Lewis also said, it's been stated several times that the specific signage or placards that are going to be placed on the property that is requiring testing, they say they're, and Rich and I had that conversation, they're nearly impossible to remove from the property, and it actually could damage the property. Is that another cost that will be borne by the landlords? If that placard is removed, then I understand at this point the zoning officer would place and I guess subsequently remove, once it's approved to be removed, that placard. So is that again go back to a cost that would be borne by the landowner, landlord, or what?
Well, who bears it now?
No idea.
The landlord does.
I'm assuming now they do.
The landlord does today, and the ordinance doesn't change anything.
I'm just asking. Okay.
Yeah,
So we're going to pay.
All costs, unfortunately, for you.
Thanks, Kenny. Okay. Little thought process here. We talked about this a little bit, but we didn't get into detail. Just giving you an example, and one property comes to mind. If a 4-unit, take your pick, property, if one of those units, a meth lab, for lack of a better word, maybe one of the portable ones is discovered, it's tested for meth, it is positive, one of, say, 4 in a building, that landowner, what if the landowner cannot afford to pay the $8,000 to $10,000 to clean that unit? Question number 1. If one of those units is test positive, what does that do to the others? If the others are tested and negative, is that landlord going to be allowed to, and I don't know if that's, I haven't seen that in state statute, if there's 4 of them are negative, 1 of them is positive, a landlord can't afford to clean up that $8,000 or $10,000 a unit. Does that render his entire property,
I think,
shut down? Or?
Jody, from what I believe, the whole building would be subject apartment by apartment to test.
Correct.
If it tested clean, you could rent it.
Okay.
If it tested dirty, you're going to have to remediate it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So if one of the, and I don't know, that's a kind of a financial thing, maybe, if that one property has one, they had a meth lab in it of some sort, it comes back positive, it has to be tested, it has to be cleaned. The other 4, just as you said, are not, so you can rent those. What happens now?
Well, they have to be tested.
Correct, if they test negative, okay. Just hypothetically again, because we're looking at all these things. What if the landlord can't afford to, they've got 4 that are rentable, 1 that's not, but they can't afford to pay to have that one tested? Do you just shut down, placard, board up, some sort of that 1 of the 4, let them continue? Is that something that, I guess, would the lien person be the cleaner upper person?
There's not a question about the cost of testing. That's not assessed.
Not testing, cleanup. It's
You
already.
said testing. I want to be sure we're distinguishing
Okay.
testing from cleanup.
They've all been tested.
If the test comes back negative,
Correct.
there's no issue. If it comes back positive, the onus is entirely upon the property owner, landlord or otherwise.
I understand.
By state law, it's up to the property owner to effect the cleanup. There's nothing in this ordinance that creates that obligation. That's state statute.
Granted, if the landowner cannot afford to clean up and pay that $10,000 to clean the 1 unit that's dirty, for lack of a better word, versus the 4, does that effectively shut down the entire building when the other 4 are okay to rent? What does that do? Do you?
I think, as the mayor said, if it tests negatively, you can re-rent the other units.
The other one is just taken out of service.
These instances where motels and a full dorm have been closed is where there are common HAV. If the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system is all tied together, all of those places are going to be contaminated.
Gotcha.
And then you could lose a whole unit.
And if you have a lab, you're gonna get a visit sooner or later from the gentleman that sat here.
Absolutely.
And he's gonna, I mean, we could say, yeah, fine, if it's test clean, you can use it. And he might come in and say, oh no, the whole building's shut down.
Right, and you don't know that,
Yeah.
Jeff, I understand.
And then we don't know what he's gonna do.
Question number 4, we kind of touched on, and maybe I missed the answer to this, I just want to be clear on it. And again, I know the onus of payment comes back to the landlord. If local law enforcement, sorry, Matt, determines there's a perceived need to have a property tested for meth, reports those recommendations to city zoning officer and to DHHR Brandon, which then does require formal testing, and the test results are negative, I'm assuming once again, even though that may be $1,000, that even though it was, sorry Matt, your recommendation who caused the recommendation is kind of a domino effect. I'm assuming that even if that's negative, the landlord's still going to have that maybe $1,000 or more cost borne to them, even though it was generated, I don't know. I'm assuming you're going to say.
That's what the state of West Virginia says right now.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm betting that a police officer that walks in there on a complaint or a whatever, and they get the burning eyes and all that sort of thing, then they're going to get out and get everybody out and tell you to have it tested. If all they find is a few cans of this and that, and they don't smell anything cooking, they're probably not gonna, I mean, they're still gonna report it, right?
That's right.
You still have to report to DHHR, right?
Yeah, we work on cause, and you know, within the city police department, we have a couple of officers who have been trained as med techs. They were trained by the DEA to process labs for criminal evidence and draw samples. And so that's the process we're going to follow. If we have cause or reason to believe by probable cause that there is a meth lab at a particular location, we're going to take whatever steps accordingly to investigate that. And if we find evidence to support our probable cause, that's when we'll engage our meth techs. And it's our meth techs that will draw the samples for the criminal case and will make the report to Mr. Lewis, as well as the DEP for the disposal on what we gathered from the property itself.
Okay.
So there is a process.
At what time do you notify the landlord or the property owner?
As part of the investigation, that's
Right up
whether it's- certainly, I think so.
This ordinance absolutely requires that, Mr. Bia. I don't think there's any requirement
I
in the
didn't
state
think there was
statute.
through the state. I
Yeah.
knew this one does.
This ordinance will require the police to notify simultaneously. Same notice goes out to Brandon Lewis, the meth abatement state guy, to Mr. Clemens, the city zoning officer, and the property owner. So everybody's going to know at the same time.
DHHR, they all get it.
Moving right along. Last one, and I think this probably holds more merit as much as anything. When we had a recent landlords forum, and I appreciate several in the audience were there as well. And Tom, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn that. When we talked about passage of this, and I don't know, has there anything been changed since our last discussion, Dave? There hasn't, has there?
3 more meth labs in Upshur County, is what I understand.
Has anything been changed in the ordinance?
No, and the
Okay.
number 381 was assigned to it 2 meetings ago. That
Okay.
hasn't changed. Not
That's
one
fine.
thing has changed.
Okay. Tom had mentioned that we were just talking about language of this. Possibly, you mentioned maybe being in favor, maybe you've changed your mind, of adding some language in there that would possibly eliminate, curb, or restrict the penalty. Am I right on the
Well,
landlord?
what I said was that I want to make sure that in the penalty section, I would be in favor of clarifying that this is only for willful violations and not imposing some kind of strict liability on the property owner for a fine, but to make sure that the fine is only imposed for knowing and willful violations of the ordinance, and not just simply, this happens, you weren't aware of it, and by the way, here's a $500 a day fine.
Because initially,
5 days, 250.
and that's exactly what I said. So you would still be in favor of maybe adding some
I would
language
be
that.
in favor of clarifying the penalty section to make sure that the penalties are only for willful violations.
That's helpful. And then it came up, and actually it was Terry Cutright, who was a county commission, and Mayor, you and Rich, and I think Tom and Ron, I mentioned to you that Terry had mentioned, and I didn't divulge who it was, I'm glad he did. I hope you picked up on that, but Terry Cutright in some conversations setting up the Candace Foreman had mentioned that he had been in discussions with a council person who I guess will remain anonymous at this point about this issue. And I guess Terry expressed some concerns about who pays for this and who pays for that. And the council person had said, well, the city's not going to pay for it. You know, the landlords are dragging in all the money every month and they're going to pay for it, which he did say at that forum, so I was glad of that. So in light of that, we talked about what other steps we might add to the ordinance for a restitution, a cleanup fund. There was discussion about levying on the landlord's properties. There was also, and I'm trying to remember who said that, and I think Terry actually brought it up, possibly looking at some type of a cleanup fund, maybe from drug seizure money and hot stuff, cool things money that's coming back to the city was specifically mentioned. And I think you, Tom and Rich, kind of said you would at least consider.
I disagree with that last piece.
Okay.
The hot stuff, cool things money is an example of the kinds of money, but I think that needs to go back to the source, which is the police. Now, if we got
we
money,
said beyond law enforcement,
if
right.
we got money from fines for meth houses or
whatever,
then that might be. But I don't think you can just take any drug money. So.
And that's why I said specifically beyond, we had talked about they're going to have costs, and I asked that question, they said they didn't know what your costs were for that investigation. We know you're getting money back, you don't know yet what money's coming back, but you also don't know what the investigation costs are. So that was just an example.
No, I don't think it is an example. I disagree with you.
Okay.
You say specifically excess funds beyond actual law enforcement costs for hot stuff, cool things. That's not the point I tried to make.
Right.
I think any money that was generated from the hot stuff, cool things needs to go to law enforcement for their distribution, however they see fit. Now, if there's money that's generated because there's charges or fines, as you have in the paragraph above, to landlords, then yes, I could see that being applied, but not just general drug enforcement money.
So I guess with that confusion, I'll close and I'll just ask once again, it's obvious there's still a lot of gray areas. I would hope the council would table this pending some more discussion on changing the language on the penalties, on looking into something, incorporating this restitution and clarifying some things. So we're hoping, and I think there's some other landlords would like to chime in so you don't hear just from me, but I would respectfully request that you would at least let us sit down again and talk a little bit further about this. Thank you.
Jody, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Are you in favor of this conceptually, that if we can dot an I and cross a T and get some things you want?
Honestly, no. I'd like to see it trashed, and I think everybody in here is landlords, and there were other landlords who wanted to come, but they felt, no offense, they were appreciative of council listening, but we've had council people say it's going to go through no matter what you say, and that's a concern, and that's been said to us. And you know, I guess we've looked at it as if there is federal law there and there is state law there. Again, and I understand the reasoning behind it, you've explained that, and I understand, is supposedly the quickness with supposedly getting a person here. When you had your last meth lab bust, and you weren't here last time to ask you, and it went to Brandon, how long did it take to start the process? Was it weeks?
Yeah, I mean, it's not overnight, certainly. I can't to be able to tell you specifically.
But it was like a huge, long, drawn-out process?
It can be a matter of time, and I think a lot of that depends on the fact that he's the only one working throughout the state and his schedule.
And that was the biggest concern in drafting the ordinance, am I right? Is that what we talked about? So conceptually, I understand where they're coming from, but since I hate to say it, I know it's a growing thing, but since it was only 5 in the city in 2013, and I hate to beat that dead horse, but it's a fact. When there's 5 meth lab busts in a year, you know, the rapidity that we seem to need to do that, I would hope we would slow down and take a look at this. If we can't basically forget it, then try to come up to something that's agreeable to everybody. Because there are even council members, and I thank you for those suggestions on some language and things.
Well, what's not agreeable?
Well, honestly, I don't know.
It's like a whole thing. What is
them.
within the context of this? Because the things that you talk about as far as costs and everything,
you have no control over it.
Right. And this could die, and you're still on the hook for those costs. Maybe somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the benefit, the thing that landlords would be gaining through this ordinance is the immediate notification. It doesn't exist now. You can go up to 2 weeks, right? before being notified.
Isn't Matt going to notify us immediately?
I don't know, maybe.
Under state current law.
This ordinance says
So
the
he's
police
not gonna
chief
tell
shall
us.
immediately,
Yeah.
as he is required to do under state statute, when he notifies the DHHR, he shall also further immediately notify the city zoning officer and the property owner.
Who notifies them?
Now.
Who notifies the property owner now?
The state of
The
West Virginia,
DHHR,
2
right?
weeks later.
Right, so.
Or a month.
Maybe, or maybe
No,
the next day.
and it may not be.
I don't think Matt's agreeing. Melissa, can we hear from Matt? Because he's
Yeah,
kind of, he's not really agreeing with that.
I mean, you know.
Can you not
the-
notify us if you-
The official tagging of the property and the official request for testing comes from the state of West Virginia. As far as, you know, you'd asked about when you'd be notified when an investigation is going on. And someone asked about if we notify you beforehand. You know, that's not practicable,
But if you find a meth lab in my property, are you going to wait a week, 2 weeks, 2 days?
No,
You're going to, okay.
Well, and you know, in
And that's
past
good.
circumstances with not necessarily you,
It helps
but,
us.
you know, a good rapport that we have with various landlords, you know, we do have a good rapport and do communicate with them when there are issues that arise with their properties. But that's just simply us notifying them that we have become involved in an investigation. Now, as far as the official, anything official,
they can't proceed
request
beyond that,
of
right.
testing and tagging the property, that comes from the state of West Virginia per his schedule.
So,
If this ordinance dies tonight, what happens? I mean, what's
Yeah,
what's the state of affairs? I mean, if,
There's no obligation for anyone within the city governmental confines to notify any property owner. There is no registry created. And 2 of the 4 penalties, 2 of the 4 are taken out of the state statute. There would be no prohibition against somebody tampering with the signs that are put up.
there's no state law?
Not at this point.
There's no state law
Mr.
against
Lewis
tampering?
has, for the last 2 years, tried to amend the state legislation. That's what's in here is the language that never got out of committee.
Okay.
So that's, yeah.
You know what, I'm inclined, the more I hear the complaints and the more I hear the concerns, I'm thinking that the best action I could do to satisfy all their concerns, I think I'm going to withdraw my support for 381 entirely.
For the what?
For the entire ordinance. Just withdraw it. I think we've gone to the point of trying to help you, and you don't want it. So I would suggest, since 95% of this is covered by the state, that we just withdraw 381 entirely. Would that not be a solution that would solve all your problems?
We had no problem, as we brought up the last time, with
You've had 3 pages of problems.
we have, we suggested that we go along, and I think if you'd read that last thing, was we suggested we start with a registry, for lack of a better word. In fact, we kind of started one anyway, but yeah, proactively, yes, but, you know, the concern is
I don't
the
think we're
penalties.
helping.
Can I speak to this?
Is that, this was done to help us?
Yes, I think it was.
Really? Okay.
Jody, you are on the string to pay these fees.
We know that.
And that seems to be, well, how much am I going to have to pay? How much am I going to have to pay? You're going to have to pay whether we pass this ordinance or not.
We understand.
I don't know what your objection to the money is. You keep talking about money.
I'm defer to them, let them speak some.
How many of these meth labs have came from landlords? A lot of the ones I see around are private individuals that are living out of the state or out of the county and don't care what happens.
Yeah.
But we're going to be penalized for what they do.
That's right.
Only regardless of this ordinance.
This ordinance doesn't penalize you.
Well, we're going to pay the price.
You already have a law that says you can't let people occupy that.
But-
Dave, you were gonna kick in there.
This came about last fall, when I first mentioned it to council before we even did a draft ordinance. I became aware of the voluntary guidelines put out by the EPA. Subsequent to that, when Mr. Lewis read the pieces about us putting together an ordinance, he saw it in the paper while he was doing a meth lab thing over in Elkins and another one in Tucker County, read it in the Intermountain, contacted me. Said, I applaud you. I love what your city's doing. You're doing some of what I've been trying to lobby for. Anyway, can I come see you about this? I might be able to make your ordinance even better. So we tabled the ordinance back in January. We had a first reading scheduled. We decided to, I specifically asked the council, look, it's my ordinance, I know that, but let's hold off until we get better data. Subsequent to that, as we learned about, and we can poo-poo the 5 arrests all you want. Anybody who wants to say that there is not a substantial drug problem in Upshur County, West Virginia, this was the epicenter of the single biggest bath salts raid in the history of the United States of America.
Yeah.
Look at the statistics. My God, Upshur County had 31 clandestine meth labs last year alone. That is third by sheer numbers, and we are 400% higher than any county in the state of West Virginia last year per capita. We are the epicenter of the meth problem for the entire state of West Virginia. And look at the counties right around us. Lewis is in the top 10. Barber, Randolph, Webster. This is where it all goes down. It's not Morgantown. Mon County's had 1 report each of the last 2 years. Right now, we are number 2 per incident in the entire state of West Virginia, based upon raw numbers. Per capita, remember that Charleston is 8.8 times the population of Upshur County. Kanawha County is 8.8 times the size. We're number 2. This map's outdated. We've already had 2 more. Kanawha County had 22 meth labs. We had 13 through May 2. We are so far ahead of the rest of the state right here in the central part of West Virginia, it's not even funny. We can't, Mr. Pugh used somewhere our discussion tonight about being an ostrich. We could choose to ignore this drug problem and not be attentive to it. This ordinance raises the bar of awareness. It supports what our police are doing and what other folks like over in FRN and UCARE and organizations like that are doing, while it also helps the property owners. There's not anything in this ordinance that I have drafted, with the single exception of the signage thing, which Mr. Lewis asked us to stick in there, that does anything that the state law now doesn't already do, that isn't a help to property owners. Landlords or otherwise. Landlords or otherwise. He's already using this ordinance as the model as he takes his show on the road to other communities. There was a presentation in Marion County just today. They're talking about the Buckhannon ordinance. What are we trying to do with this ordinance? What are we trying to do?
David, I want to respond, and I don't want to sound too cynical, but I guess I am. I think one of the issues we have in Upshur County, in the city of Buckhannon, is we don't have a plan. You know, we don't sit down together with the sheriff's department or the police department together, and the county commission and the city council and the school board and the college. That's what we need. I mean, this is not I have some reservations about the ordinance, but that's not going to really change anything until this community comes together with a cohesive plan, including the prosecuting attorney. You know, that's our issue in this city and the county, and I think there are some things you might want to, as Tom indicated, that he want to have a little I here and a T there and so forth. I think that's a start, but the same thing, we don't have a plan to eradicate drugs in this county, and that's what we need, much more than even this. And this may be the start, as you're saying, but let's get together as a group and really deal with it. We haven't done it. I mean, that's one of the issues I have.
Well, we did the ordinance on the bath salts and.
Yeah,
you know,
but we still don't
trying
have
to do
a
what we
plan.
had to do, but this is to protect my grandkids or your grandkids from having to move into an apartment that's infected with meth or something else. It's to protect somebody moving in there. Christine.
But is that not already covered by state law?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well,
This
I mean,
And I'm not here as a landlord or a property owner. And I'm going to try to be quick. I tend to ramble, so I typed up what I wanted to say.
So take as long as you want.
Um,
That's not the mayor's position, but.
I'll try to be quick. I am happy that everybody here tonight's talking about the databases and privacy, because that's a little bit of what I want to touch on with this. But most of you will remember me sitting in this very room and begging the council not to fall behind our sister cities in combating this drug epidemic in our community. And while this is still my plea to this council, I must elaborate on the request that we can ensure our actions as a community in fighting this disease are proactive and not reactive, or worse, destructive. I believe we all share the common desire to free our city from substance abuse and the ramifications that come with that. My concern is that by wanting to rid our town of both the short and long-term negative effects of substance abuse, that we're turning a blind eye to our own hand that keeps us in this cycle. The proposed ordinance can be broken down into 3 points, and I'm not going to go over all of those again. I put them in my letter, but we've discussed them tonight. This ordinance adds nothing to what is already in place at a state and federal level. Matt has already said the property owner is getting notified. And does it really matter if they're notified at day 1 or day 14? They still have to go through the process. They still have to follow all guidelines that the state and the federal government and the EPA have set about. It doesn't matter what day they get notified. In addition to that, we are setting up and using time and resources and funds from our zoning officer to duplicate what's already being done. The zoning officer will now duplicate the efforts of law enforcement, and they will duplicate the efforts of DHHR when they go out and post and when they remove to the reoccupancy letter. We're not doing anything but spending time and resources and doing what's already being done. I appreciate the Landlord Association already speaking in depth on their concerns, and I feel they've covered those issues, and I don't need to elaborate on any of that. In regards to a fine and the city being able to collect money, Mayor Davidson, you already brought up that we do already have an ordinance in place, that Mr. McCauley was essential in writing. And that ordinance already allows the city to collect a fine. They're allowed to collect a fine for virtually any intoxicating substance, its use, its possession, its creation, its advertisement, or otherwise, which would include methamphetamine.
But it doesn't allow us to collect a fine for somebody renting that apartment while it was contaminated.
Actually, it does. The ordinance...
Actually, I don't think so.
Well, I would have to bring the ordinance back up, but I believe it was drafted so that we could fine the individual, and there were also accommodations in that.
We can fine them for cooking it, for consuming it, but we can't fine somebody for renting an apartment to someone that is, the apartment is contaminated, or somebody going in voluntarily.
I will have to reread the ordinance because I believe we went back and forth, and maybe I'm wrong. But that was one of the things.
But the state does.
The state does.
But the state.
But that was also one of the things that the city was discussing about pulling business licenses and different things if the owners of those properties did not comply with this ordinance, because you're not allowed to have it on your property. That was, I mean, there are many other wises that Mr. McCauley put into that ordinance that I would suggest the council go back and revisit, and maybe we can change or tweak that verbiage instead of creating a brand new ordinance to where the people of this town are thinking that we're just ordinance happy. We're not implementing, we're not doing anything that we've already covered in ordinances. We're going to make up a brand new ordinance that overlays what the state and the federal government's already doing.
We have an ordinance, Chrissy, that says we shall make an ordinance every meeting, so there you go.
The only new item that this ordinance brings to the table, in my opinion, is the registry of individuals. And that's my biggest concern with this ordinance. Constituents of this community understand that the lack of affordable housing, drug and mental health treatment, jobs, and positive role models undermine our efforts to make individuals transition from corrections and rehabilitative institutions to the community successful. We know the cost to individuals' lives and taxpayer dollars are too high to allow reentry work to fail. Placing a member of our community on a path for failure should never be an option.
So are you saying that if a person rents an apartment and either they or a friend of theirs, somebody, they allow somebody to cook meth in that apartment, you're saying landlords don't have the right to know that?
They do have the right, but they're already being notified.
No. The registry, if a renter, and the registry is probably the least controversial part of this ordinance, I think, from the landlord's perspective. The registry would put renters on notice for individuals who previously rented apartments where meth was cooked. Whether they were convicted, whether they were doing the cooking or whether they allowed the cooking to go on under their nose, whether or not they were charged with a crime. Are you suggesting that renters don't have the right to know that?
Isn't that the landlord's responsibility? Because the way I read the verbiage of this ordinance.
But what he's saying is, how are we going to know if there's not a list?
Okay, then I'm confused because I thought you're asking me,
Yes, but how
don't the landlords have the right to know
Subsequent landlords, future
that
renters.
this renter has
a history. Yeah.
That's already available.
Where?
Criminal history is public knowledge.
Not if a person is only going to show up on a criminal history if they themselves are charged. The purpose of the registry is to get people who allow or facilitate, even if they're not charged themselves.
But that is my problem.
So you don't think that people that allow meth to be cooked in their apartment should be?
I think people who continually choose that path, yes. What are we saying to the person who is arrested, who goes into and changes, comes out changed? Now you are setting the city up for discrimination and Federal Trade Commission violations because you're keeping a registry against someone who's changed. And now you're creating at-risk scenarios for our community.
That's not true because
It is true.
drug convictions are not a protected class under anti-discrimination laws.
I'm not saying they're protected. But we already have a registry of people at the courthouse that have been convicted or arrested. So now you're saying that you just want to make a registry at your determination. So who gets to decide if that person knows that meth was going on in their home? If a teenager is arrested, do the parents get put on? Does the brother who stopped over every night and didn't call law enforcement, does he get put on? And so now you've created in 8 years, say I have a teenager. I didn't know what was going on. It was one of the portable things, and I don't know nothing about meth, so it was in his car, but his car's parked at my house. So I get put on the list. I've never broken the law. I've never done anything. I've never tried drugs in my entire life. But now you're going to put me on a list, and you're going to make that public to where anyone can call down here at any time of the day and say, hey, Christine Bennett wants to rent my property. Is she on the list? Yes, she is. Are you going to tell them that I really didn't know anything about it? It's a problem.
It's not a problem.
And see, let's don't get off in all these scenarios. Let's talk about the ordinance. You know,
You guys just think, if I come to your house at a party and I got a meth in my car, you're gonna be busted.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But you may not know it.
John, you could be completely innocent.
Not in the interest of time, but in the interest of trying to move us towards something.
Yeah.
There are obviously some concerns on behalf of the landlords. I support this ordinance, but there are some concerns on behalf of the landlords, some of which are things we can address, some of which are things we cannot address. There are also some suggestions by Councilman O'Neill about maybe some language that we might include. I would like to make a motion that we table this one more meeting, but only with the purpose of trying to alleviate whatever is possible if there are things we can address in the language, but with a mind toward trying to put a timetable on it. But I would make that motion.
I would amend that motion to say by July the 1st.
That would be appropriate.
That gives us, I don't want to put the pressure on Tom and Dave. They're going to write the legislature about the other stuff. And, we got through 3 more meetings until the new fiscal year.
And you're talking about getting the county involved and everything like that.
Yeah, I
talked
want-
to the county, the
County won't pass it.
the administrator who will soon be the second previous administrator, she told me that the county has no interest whatsoever in helping us with this.
But how about drug problems? Aren't they interested in that?
I guess not.
Well, I think that's more crap.
Well, the only thing
I'm sure they are.
You can put that in the paper.
I have a question. What would happen if, on a Thursday during a county commission meeting, if Mr. McCauley would go before commission and be as zealous as he was here tonight?
They throw it out.
No, I'm serious, in front of the media and say, we really need this. And I've been.
Bill Hamilton did that about 6 or 7 months ago. He did an excellent presentation, Elisa. I'll go with you, David.
We have a motion to table, an amendment to table it no further than the first meeting in July, and I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Already been second.
Motion made, table. Motion to table no further than the first meeting in July.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
I would just like to add one thing and then I'll sit down.
please.
My suggestion
Be
in my
brief.
letter that I didn't finish is instead of this ordinance that is duplicative of what's already in place, I would ask the mayor and council to have a discussion in the future about starting a reentry initiative for this community, because we do have a major drug problem. And like Mr. Thomas pointed out, we've got to all come together and have some kind of collaborative effort where we get these groups and nonprofits and various organizations and law enforcement all on the same page and do something productive. Because right now we're just facilitating the cycle. And so I would ask council to have a discussion on maybe having an advisory committee, a reentry initiative. There's multiple things, that grants even for that, to where we could all sit down together and come up with a productive plan to do something about this, because it is a problem.
And you can change.
Yes, you absolutely can change.
I mean, I have a son that had an issue with drugs.
My stepson,
He sat in jail for 30 days, and his mother said I was an awful person because I wouldn't get him an attorney or get him bail. And he said that's one thing that changes your life when you spend some time in jail. And he's now in nursing school and works in an emergency room.
and by us putting people on a list or not looking at prevention and education, we can't be reactive. We've got to change our focus and be proactive, because they can change. But if when they come back to our community, we're still backwards, we force them to fail, which never fixes our community problem.
I hadn't thought about the list much, Chrissy, until you brought that up, but I guess that if somebody throws a bottle of cooking stuff on my front porch, I'm going to be on that list.
Well, and there's no language right now that specifies how that's determined.
I got one question.
It's very clear, Mayor. May I just read that registry section, please?
Oh, please hurry.
Oh, well.
We've already tabled this thing.
I like Rich's idea better.
The city zoning officer shall maintain for public inspection a registry of all persons determined to have been responsible for creating or contributing to the creation of meth or other controlled substance residue that prompts meth or controlled substance contamination abatement within any building or other structure situated within the corporate limits of the city of Buckhannon. The only person that can order contamination abatement is Brandon Lewis with the state of West Virginia.
But if a
So
person
until-
is not convicted, who gets to determine who's responsible?
Conviction has nothing to do with this. Oftentimes, criminal charges go away from people who have made meth. The criminal justice system has nothing to do with this ordinance. Absolutely nothing. Might not be any criminal prosecution.
Read that first part again, please.
The city zoning officer shall maintain for public inspection a registry of all persons determined to have been responsible.
Been responsible, that's what I want.
Determined to have been responsible for creating or contributing to the creation of meth or other controlled substance residue that prompts meth, I'm sorry, I lost my place, that prompts meth or controlled substance contamination abatement.
Yeah, been responsible, that's very
Let's move ahead.
important words.
Let's move ahead. We're going to department and board reports.
I had one.
We've tabled the ordinance, we tabled the ordinance.
I have one question. What do you do with cars that are contaminated?
Burn them.
I'm serious. What
Literally, you burn them. They can't be, they can't be fixed. They can't be fixed.
Two state vehicles,
Can't be fixed.
He said they crush them.
They crush
Well, then what happens to a police cruiser that's got somebody?
Scott Williams, now I'm going to jump ahead. I'm trying to get the board reports, but there's one other person who's been waiting patiently with a yes beside his name. Scott, what do you have?
It's been tabled.
Officially?
How you doing, Scott?
Hi, Dave. There's no reason for me to speak then, so.
Because you didn't have any subject.
I only have one thing to say. Dave, nice socks.
McCullough, he's got socks. Michael Stark.
Okay. Stand up.
Yeah. City Administrator for Financial Audit.
Kenny, there'll be no reading?
We're done.
Okay, that's what you
We
said.
tabled it.
I won't make the minutes. I'm going to do my homework report backwards, and then we'll have Matt do his annual report. So we can watch Jimmy Fallon later on.
Go, please, get at it.
Okay.
We haven't made our flat
Come on,
yet.
Ready to go? You do have the financial report ending April 2014. Some good news, actually. To this point, our total revenues are $3,186,981.68. Our expenditures to this point are $2,890,389.33, which means we have excess of revenues over expenditures at this point in the year of $296,592.35. This is the report you usually get. It's a summary. Again, I'll mention to council, if anyone wants a much more comprehensive departmental report breakdown, please see me after the council meeting or contact me. I'll be happy to give you a little bit more detailed report. I'm not sure if the next items are going to yield much discussion, and they probably should. But under old business, a few months ago, we indicated to council our renewal on our health insurance for our employees. We had a representative from Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield here to introduce our renewal, just to relive that horror story. The renewal for our employees for health insurance going into the next renewal for 14-15 was going to take a 16.6% increase, 16.6% increase. Currently, we pay monthly $75,376. If we're going to do the math on that, a 16.6% increase would have been an increase up to $87,888 a month for all of our employees. Our employees are 90 employees, by the way. Highmark went back and sharpened the old pencil, which I'm not surprised. Came back with a revised renewal, if you will, of 12% even. So 12% would take us down to $84,421 as opposed to $87,888. I made a request with Jamie Powell of Loudon Insurance, who is our insurance agent representative, at the request of council and direction of council to contact other health insurance providers aside from Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield to possibly give us quotes. Unfortunately, in the state of West Virginia, our choices are fairly limited as far as health providers are concerned. One of the agencies, or one of the health providers that he contacted was a company called Starmark. On its face, in looking at our health insurance renewal with Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, the best that they could come up with us was $89,598.24. $89,598.24. Again, the pencil sharpened renewal was $84,421, so just a little bit over the pencil sharpened renewal. Jamie then contacted a company called Coventry, which has merged with Aetna. You're probably more familiar with the Aetna brand. Aetna looked at our numbers after getting some preliminary information from us, our employees, their age, their marital status, their dependents, decided they were not going to quote us, which really left us, unfortunately, back to Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Our finances are in fairly decent shape,
but the increasing cost of health insurance is something we need to seriously look at. And with this renewal, even the sharpened pencil renewal of down to 12%, makes this employee insurance coverage a little bit more interesting. So I asked Jamie to take a look. Our current deductible for single employees is $750. Our family is $1,500. We kept the deductible the same. A little bit of a misnomer in my experience, just kind of digressing a little bit with insurance, is it's not like car insurance or house insurance where you change your deductible, you get a pretty significant decrease in your premiums. You don't really get much bang for a buck with your deductible increase. The real bang for your buck that you get is actually in the plan itself. So with that in mind, we kept the deductible the same, and Highmark presented us two options. The first option, in keeping the deductible the same at $750 and $1,500, would actually increase what is called the co-insurance limits. Co-insurance limits from 3,000 individual, 6,000 family, to 4,000 individual, 8,000 family. It would also change the office visits from $25 to $35 and $45 respectively, depending on if they had an emergent care visit or they went to see a specialist. That change in the plan under that first option actually yielded us, just off of our current health providing, or our current health coverage, a 6% increase. So again, we went from $75,376 to $79,900. Again, that's not with the deductible change, but that is a little bit of a change in our plan.
That's a stop loss?
Correct. Our second option actually did implement a little bit of a deductible. Again, the policy or the plan that we changed in option 2, if you're following along, would still be the same plan that we have in option 2, except with the exception that we actually did look at increasing the deductible from $750 single and $1,500 family to $1,000 single and $2,000 family. And again, what I had just mentioned earlier, changing deductibles really doesn't give you the bang for your buck. That actually went from a 6% increase to a 4.68% increase. I know I'm hitting you with numbers. Really from $79,900 monthly to $78,900 with just that change in deductible. So with that being said, I'm really disappointed in the approach personally and professionally that Highmark has taken with the city of Buckhannon in relation to our employees' health insurance. I want to be cognizant as treasurer of the city and also as an employee, and trying to provide great coverage for our employees, but still trying to look after the citizens and taxpayers' money of the city. So at this point, in reading along, my recommendation to council for our renewal is to go with the first option that Highmark has presented to us, which would be a 6% increase, where the deductible for employees would remain the same as it currently is. However, the co-insurance limitation and some of the office visits and specialist visits and emergency room visits would increase basically on the average of $10 more per visit for the copay. That would take our current health that we're providing, again, at $75,376 monthly to $79,900.
Have you discussed it? Have the employees been notified of this potential?
Employees have not been notified of this.
So that would cost us on an annual basis almost $60,000, is what you're saying?
Roughly.
What have you
I
combined?
do want to say this though, Dave. It is $60,000, but the one thing we have to remember is we have 90 employees, and not all those 90 employees are in general fund. We all know that. So that's spread out over water, sewer, waste.
I'm saying what the city's going to have to be 60 grand.
Correct.
I'm looking at this as an entity. What have you combined the increase in the deductible and the increase in the stop loss?
Well, the increase in the deductible was option 2.
But you didn't combine them together?
No, we actually looked at increasing the plan in the second option and increasing the deductible, and that only decreased the overall by about a little over 1.25%.
So
again, the deductible is somewhat of a moot point, to be honest, and I've dealt with this in other municipalities and insurance. Really, the only way that you're going to get a change is to actually look at the plan itself. That's it.
I appreciate the work you've done on this, and we're in a period of just unbelievable change in our health care in this country. there's two things that I would just suggest. One, when we look at healthcare and what the consequences are going to be for our employees and also for the city, which ultimately is the residents within the city, we have to look at it in the context of our total compensation package. And I believe we have one of the best compensation packages anywhere in the city and the county. And I think it's important that at some point in time, one, that on an annual basis, I think the city should give a one-page sheet to each employee what it actually is costing the city or the investment, I mean, you look at it that way, for having an employee be full-time and their salary, their wages, their health insurance contribution that we're making, the pension plan, the Social Security, workers' comp, et cetera, and including that holidays and vacations. And I think employees would be flabbergasted with, what is on that page. I think that's important for every employer to show what the investment is to their people. And I also think it's important at some point in time, I believe we are probably the only employer in this area that pays 100% of the premium. I'm not suggesting we change that now, but I think at some point in time, when you look at everything as far as the total compensation package, we will have to ask our employees to contribute part of their premium. And we have to see what the impact of Obamacare is going to be and so forth. But I think we need meetings with employees, as Tom suggested. That's important that we indicate to them what are the opportunities that are out there and what are the cost consequences both to them and to the city. They're where they get their paychecks from. And that's important.
Question, Tom?
Michael, at what point do we have to pull a trigger on this, so to speak?
Renewal is July 1.
Okay, because what I'm, because I'd like to, or I think it would probably be a good thing to just get some, employee input on the option, at least. And, I don't know if pushing a decision back to the first meeting in June, if that pushes it back too far to make a decision on this, or do we have to make a decision on this tonight?
No, I mean, it's just something that I told you I would come back to you on when I got information, once we had received quotes or feedback from the other health providers. Again, I do want to stress this, and we have some department heads in the room. The option that I'm recommending does not change the deductible. It does not change the deductible. It does not change the co-insurance. That's still the same. It does change the co-insurance limitation. Currently, it's 3,000 single, 6,000 family. It would go 4,000 single, 8,000 family.
Now explain what that means.
Co-insurance is basically a partnership and the split between what the insurer will pay, max, and what the insured will pay as well.
So, I mean, to make it clear is that the individual currently, they have a stop loss of $3,000. Mm-hmm. And with the new plan, they will go up to a stop loss of $4,000.
Individual, correct.
Right. And that means if they have some kind of, illness that costs $100,000, that they're only going to be required to pay $3,000 out of pocket. And the new plan would be $4,000 out of pocket.
Yeah, my understanding is yes.
Yeah, I mean that's I've always called it a stop loss
Right.
because
Well,
it protects the individual.
Catastrophic.
And I think one of the issues we have as an employer that a lot of employers are asking their employees that they need to pay a certain reasonable percentage of maintenance. I mean, we pay for their blood work once a year or twice a year?
Once a year.
Once a year. And so, I mean, I think you have to look at that all in context. And, I think your recommendation is fine, but I do think it's important, as Tom suggests, sit down with the employees and the supervisors and you know, they need to understand what's happening out there and you know.
Well, if I may continue.
Yeah.
Just to relay this plan out further, the other change. Office visits currently pay $25. They would still pay $25. A specialist, $25, and our current plan is all $25 across the board. Their office visit now would be $35 for a specialist instead of $25, and then the emergency room would go from $25 to $45, and that's it. Everything else remains the same. You know, the point was to look at deductibles. Honestly, we were not getting our bang for our buck, if you will, by changing that. The 6%, I guess, if you want to beat up on President Obama and the ACA, is really the absorption of the cost of those fines and fees that we get there. Essentially, we're probably maybe a percent, maybe a little bit percent more than that. And that's something we can't avoid or escape, are all those fees and charges that have been put on based on the ACA. So that's my recommendation. Again, you don't have to make a decision tonight. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure I come off my recommendation, but
well, I guess my view is that instead of, sorry, if I may, I guess my view just is, instead of voting on it tonight, and I anticipate going with your recommendation, but I think there's just a difference between voting on it tonight and presenting it to the employees and say, this is what we voted on, this is what you got, versus let's take the vote at the next meeting, and between now and then say, this is what we're going to do. Is this really, I mean, what do you think here? I mean, we've got to, you know, we can't just absorb the increase. We have to, something's got to give a little bit, and just, you know, talk to them before we make the decision versus after we make the decision.
Well, you're looking at 60,000 for the entire city versus 170,000 almost for the entire city. And I mean, that's a huge difference.
156 of
Pardon?
156 off of the original renewal that we had.
Yeah, the primary difference to the individual is going to be the increase in the co-pays. You know, that stop loss.
Specialists and emergency co-pays. That's the change. What's your pleasure?
Well, I'd vote for it tonight, but I don't think it will hurt for if you know, Tom's suggestion, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd vote for it tonight too, but I think I would prefer to have the conversation before the decision is formally made versus after it's formally.
Would you like me to formally report back to you the employees'
yeah, and if any of them want
concerns
to
or
talk,
comments?
you know, I'd say we can listen to it.
Okay.
I think we really do need to talk about it again after the employees are, I know, I always hated getting backsided with extra costs and simply, but yeah, it's.
Okay. Okay, I will get back to you all. First council meeting in June. Next item is new business. You do have in front of you, although I don't think you have a fancy copy like I do, this thing, but you have a printed copy of it, of the audit, the 2012-2013 audit. Our audit is complete. Mary got a copy of that. The audit is complete. It's available for council's inspection. Again, you all have a copy of that, and also inspection by the public as well. To just give you an overview of that, the city did receive what is called an unqualified opinion. An unqualified opinion, which sounds really ugly, but it's actually the best opinion that you can get. An unqualified opinion, just for some self-education, indicates the following. Our financial statement has been prepared using the generally accepted accounting principles, which have been consistently applied. The financial statements comply with the relevant statutory requirements and regulations. There is adequate disclosure of all materials relevant to the proper presentation of the financial information, subject to statutory requirements where applicable. And any changes in the accounting principles or in the methods of their application and the effects thereof have been properly determined and disclosed in the financial statements. I will tell you this, we had one finding. Can anybody guess, veterans of council, what that finding was?
Separation of duties.
Segregation of duties. Segregation of duties is something common. If you go to any state auditor conference or session and ask them about it, it's something that municipalities frequently receive. Segregation of duties is basically entities of our size and our limited staff. Sometimes we cross-train and have responsibilities. We can't really avoid that too much. And it's just something that is always noted in our financial statement. It's noted in financial statements, City of Charleston, and other places as well. But that is our only finding that we did receive, and that's on the very last page, I believe, of your audit.
What's the cost of the audit?
It's the cost of the audit. The total cost of the audit is about $6,000. $6,000.
Which is the maximum that they can charge you.
I do want to state that after you all have had an opportunity to read the audit, especially I know there's a couple of new individuals that'll be on council in July, we would like to set up what is called an exit conference, which gives you all an opportunity to take a look at the financial statements in the audit. And if you have any questions, you then have the ability to talk to the auditors. In this case, it's Teacher Bartlett, who did our audit, and ask them any questions, and they can provide those answers for you. Usually we'll set up an audit conference sometime in August, so I'll be approaching you sometime in July about setting something up in August, but do want to let you know that an audit exit conference is on the table. I do want to apologize in advance because we've had a long council night and we talked about ordinances, but I don't think I would be doing my fiduciary responsibility as treasurer of the city of Buckhannon if I didn't ask council to consider a proposed ordinance, and let me bear with me here. We do not have the ability, or we do have the ability, but we have to have an ordinance to do it. But since we don't have an ordinance, we don't have the ability to do it. Under Chapter 13, Section 8, 1313, subsection D in the West Virginia Code, that notes special charges for municipal services. I want to go into this. Subsection D states, a municipality has the authority to enact an ordinance pursuant to the section permitting it to file a lien on real property located within the municipal corporate limits for unpaid and delinquent fire, police, or street fees, which we do not have. We do not have street fees. I would also ask that you all consider authorizing Mr. McCauley and myself and our office staff to work on creating this ordinance. Our problem is we cannot collect. We can collect for water and sewer services. We cannot collect, and it's hard to collect, for collection of delinquent police fees, fire fees, and sanitation or waste fees. So it's very difficult for us to collect those.
How much money are we talking about?
A few $1,000s.
How much?
A few $1,000s that we have lost in that we cannot collect. That's just in police and fire
A
fees.
few thousand.
That's in just police and fire fees alone. That's not even in our waste. When we have people that unfortunately pass on with their estates, if they've amassed quite a bit of delinquent fees, we do not have teeth to collect those fees unless we pass an ordinance per West Virginia State Code. And again, I'm not a big fan of ordinances in the sense, and I know we've talked about that tonight, but this is one thing that's going to enable me and my staff to do the necessary things to collect revenues that have been entitled for services provided from the city of Buckhannon.
Michael, is it going to be a problem if we just delay this until after July the 1st? I'm not in the mood to discuss ordinances or anything.
I just want to put
the rest of the council members.
Just want to put you on notice that, I mean,
ordinances just don't thrill me to death nowadays.
Sure.
Well,
We don't enforce them once we
I'll play.
Well,
I want
enforcing this one.
Michael, I would like to defer any ordinance until after July 1. There are things that I brought up from this council that, as far as I'm concerned, are legacy issues that we as a city have an unlevel playing field for our residents and our various enterprises, and we need to address them. And I can think of 4 ordinances that we ought to deal with, but I don't want to deal with them until after July the 1st. And I'll talk about it at some point in time in an executive session, which we probably don't want to do tonight, but I'll outline my concerns. And we just need to start acting more like a business, which we don't do sometimes. That's all I got to say.
Ron, to answer your question, yeah, that's fine. It's nothing pressing. It's just I want to have the ability to collect those revenues, which is my responsibility as treasurer to do. And I have to have an ordinance in place for state code to do that.
You can't file a claim against an estate.
Huh?
You can't file a claim against an estate.
We can file a claim against an estate for utilities, public utilities, but we
not
need
garbage, not police.
We can. if we have an ordinance.
Yeah, we need, in addition to that, we need to do some other things too. That's all I'm saying.
So anyway, that's all I have.
Well, we're not talking about a lien here. I'm just talking about filing a notice of claim against a decedent's estate. I mean, we can do that now.
Well, we've come so far down the list though, and we probably
Well,
wouldn't get
depends on,
anything
well,
anyway.
depends on.
You got to scratch it.
Well, anyway, I see what you mean. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Do you
So, the lien part, but we're not, I was talking about the lien. I was talking about.
Right, and again, you know, I mean,
That's what I was worried about.
earlier
Keep 'em over there,
that, you know, what's another month or two to wait, although we could have one or two slip through the cracks, but I'm fine, Ron, with waiting until July, but it's something I will bring back up to you guys because, you know, it's a collection of delinquencies. That's all I have.
Any other questions, Mike?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt?
The only thing I have to report on tonight is we continue to move forward with preparing for the public informational meeting that I spoke about last month about our Volunteers in Police Service program. I've had some conversations with some interested individuals in the community, just out in the public. Had some folks telephone the office, had some emails of some interested individuals. And so I just want to continue to push the word out for any interested individual wanting to get involved and volunteer in this capacity. And if you folks could continue to assist me in getting the word out as we move toward this. We are still planning on having an informational meeting about what all of this program will entail on Wednesday, June 4th, here in Council Chambers at 6 p.m. And at that point, I really anticipate at least beginning to get the ball rolling and starting to take the engaged interest and begin to solicit applications from individuals who want to become involved. And we just came through the Strawberry Festival, and so while we do not have obviously the formal program together yet, we were able to engage, as we have in the past, members of the Deputy Reserve, but in addition to that, volunteers from the Strawberry Festival and CERT volunteers as well, and they were a major asset in assisting us with covering some barricaded streets and helping with other issues that we had along the parade routes. So it was a major assistance to my staff and all of law enforcement to have volunteer assistance. And again, what this VIPS program is doing is just formalizing it under the umbrella of the City of Buckhannon Police Department.
Have you had a lot of inquiries on that?
I've had a few, yeah. I've had some emails, and I spoke to some individuals on the streets this past Strawberry Festival about it, and asking some questions about it. I had somebody telephone in, so I've had a few, and so I'm, you know, the future's unknown. I hope that there is enough interest to get the program up and running and moving forward. And you know, if we have 5 or 10 folks from the community that are willing to help us with a lot of the things that we needed help with just this past week, but in addition to that, some of the programs that we do that could alleviate an officer's busy schedule and help us to continue the quality of programs and again our outreach with other events that we're unable to help with, such as 5Ks and other events. I would certainly welcome somebody that wants to get involved. So again, if you know of anybody that's interested, push this out. Again, as we move toward this informational meeting, as I spoke last time, part of the process will be to involve a member of City Council to be on the board that will select or make the decision whether or not the volunteer will be part of the program, if there will be a good fit. And so I would ask you folks to think seriously about that, and if that's something that interests you, to step forward and be part of the process.
Could you have college kids involved in that?
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, we had two college students help us last week. One is a current intern with us during the May term, and one apparently we left a good impression on, who interned with us in the spring. He came back, and he's not local, but he's not far away. He's from Grafton, and so he stayed in the area during the Strawberry Festival, and he assisted us in some of the events, and very much welcome that. In fact, this particular young man has, when he comes back this fall for classes, has expressed interest in becoming part of the program formally.
They have criminal justice.
Absolutely, and we have connections through the criminal justice program, and I fully intend on recruiting volunteers through the program, not just with the community, but specifically with the criminal justice program at the college. I have a direct connection with that program, so that's one of my intentions, is to seek their assistance and their involvement with our department and the things that we need help with, certainly.
I think it's a great idea.
So I guess as we move toward that, not only council's involvement with an individual or an individual council member being part of the board, but I would also ask for you to, maybe in the next meeting or two, as we begin the ball rolling on this, is to formally adopt the program. And boy, I tell you, I wish I would have spoke about 2.5 hours ago, and I hate to beat this horse, but perhaps an ordinance would be appropriate to adopt the program, but some type of formal adoption. I'll just throw that out there.
Come back with the law.
Are you going to have any kind of
type of background check on these
Yes.
people?
There is we've worked over the last 2 months of forming a policy. We've had influences from the existing policy with the Sheriff's Reserves, and we've used model policies from the International Association of Chiefs of Police, who endorses the VIPS program. It's an umbrella program through that organization. So through the variety of sources, we have been able to sculpt a very nice policy for the program. And part of the application process, if you will, in addition to the application and the oral review board, which would consist of myself, our lieutenants, our VIPS liaison, or the officers we're going to appoint to be the liaison, but also a member of council and a member of the Buckhannon Police Civil Service to serve on this board. And by majority vote of this board, that's part of the process for acceptance. But in addition to that, part of the process is also a background check. And it specifically says that individuals with felony convictions or convictions of moral turpitude are ineligible to be part of the program.
So, what's the name of the young man helping you out May term?
Alex Trentz.
I had a class with him, couldn't remember his name.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Matt?
Matt, what do you think about getting the whole county and city and sheriff's department, your department, college, and the school board to really work on this drug problem we have?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that reminds me. About a year or so ago, the governor, his leadership, reached out to a variety of state agencies, including the head of the state police, and just off the top of my head, the head of the DHHR, and I'm not sure if the Prosecuting Attorneys Institute was involved or not. I'm sure they had to have been along the way. But he had a panel of individuals at the state level, and basically they went on a listening/discussion tour around various places in the state, and we were able to attend one of those sessions in Clarksburg, and basically what occurred at that meeting is what I'm assuming would be your expectations for a meeting such as that, and that's just seeking input from the law enforcement agencies, prosecuting attorneys, the variety of criminal justice partners throughout each area that they visited to address these issues on a state level. And I know they traveled to Clarksburg, and then they traveled to the Panhandles, the southern part of the state. And so certainly something more on a local level, with the leadership of our governmental agencies, whether be council or commission, or council and commission combined, engaging the criminal justice and the health and human services aspect of our community would certainly be similar to what they were doing on a state level, but obviously more focused on our local level problems.
You know, one way to look at what David was saying so passionately is that maybe we're ranking up there so high because we're doing better law enforcement than other municipalities and counties are doing. I mean, it's sort of a double-edged sword how you look at that.
A double-edged sword, and a victim of circumstance.
I would think so.
That's my view. I think the statistics are a function of increased law enforcement activity versus other jurisdictions.
Well, I think we talked about with the access of Inflex.
Yeah, and you guys use Inflex here, and I know for a fact that other jurisdictions couldn't care less about it.
Or don't know about it.
Yeah, well, they know about it.
I think we're just smarter.
That's right.
Well, if Alex helps you out, he'd be good as a physical deterrent, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. He got a few comments along the way during the Strawberry Festival at the
replace him with the small
street
town
parties.
force.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, the Child Advocacy Center, which is for physically and sexually abused children, we have a good program in place now, and so you're seeing a lot more use of it than we had when it was not very, sort of just not there. So there's two ways to look at those statistics.
Again, not to beat a dead horse and we'll change the subject, but if council just give some serious consideration to some type of formal adoption of our VIPS program.
You'll bring it next meeting.
Well, we'll be ready to move forward more so than what we are now. We're still in the informational phase. The meeting for the public to come and ask questions and be engaged will be June 4th, and at that point I really want to at least start getting the ball rolling and start accepting applications and starting the process. I really don't anticipate starting the training and starting it in earnest until mid to late August, and that's just because of a lot of the summer activities that's going on between our move to our new facility and summer vacations and stuff like that would prohibit us from having a training session.
You might want to do in September that where you allow the college kids to.
Yeah, and again, that's another reason behind that line of thinking is to begin engaging the fall semester as it begins in mid-August, early September there, and really start having something, having it as a viable resource, beginning with our fall activities and getting their feet wet with that as we move into the next Strawberry Festival. But if we could get council to formally adopt that, I think it would show that we're, as a governmental entity, embracing this as a program for our city.
Any more questions for Matt?
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Sam?
Well, we did have a sanitary board meeting last week, normal time. The board did approve the 2014-2015 budget. We had some discussion about the Weston Road sewer extension. And we had engaged an engineering firm to assist us in that project. And one of the things that we noted in some of their visits to the site was that there would be a tremendous advantage in continuing, as we did earlier, to put the sewer in the old railroad grade. So we initiated communication with CSX Railroad, and probably over the last 9 months we've continued negotiations. And about a month ago, we essentially reached agreement on a price, and they provided us a purchase sale agreement, which was approved by the board, and we want to proceed with that purchase. The purchase price is $30,000, and we think we will save several times that much in the installation cost of the sewer line. That will take action by city council. I mean, the board will pay for the purchase, but any purchase is in the name of the city of Buckhannon. I think that's a matter that you plan to address, Dave?
Yes.
Okay. Other matters of discussion, Brook Street Pump Station, our emergency project, we've made good progress on that since we've gotten a little bit better weather. It basically includes a pump station and 2,200 feet of force main. The force main is essentially complete. The pump station is pretty near complete. We've done quite a bit of work on the electrical, and that's we still have to install a short segment of gravity sewer, do a little bit of site grading, and install the electric gear, and we'll be able to put that in operation. And we're talking a few weeks. I would expect it to be in operation in early June. We also had discussion about the NPDS permit. And as you know, we talked about it so many times. We did appeal. We had an agreed order which gave us certain opportunities relative to certain discharge limits. We've attempted to negotiate with DEP about those limits. Didn't ever seem to make a whole lot of headway. But one of the provisions of the agreed order was that if we thought we had a sound argument, we could formally request a modification. And having failed to get concurrence with DEP, we have proceeded to submit a formal application for a modification to our permit. Reported that we're proceeding with a continuation of the sewer extension on the Burton Phillips farm. There's a development being sponsored by Lanny Dorr. The back side of the farm, and it will require sewer service across the farm, and we've prepared for that by extending sewer across the Buckhannon Housing Authority. And that's completed, and we're preparing to do the second part of that extension. With the Brook Street project and the Burton Phillips projects beginning to see some closure, we're moving back to the Pistagrit, the grit removal facilities at the treatment plant, upgrade project, and have kind of reactivated a couple of vendors working on some equipment for that project. And this wasn't a matter for the board, but we had a pretty major inspection by DEP the last couple of days, and it seemed to go well based on their verbal reports to us. That's all.
Questions for Sam? Thank you, Sam. Kelly.
It's all right, I got a 16-page end-of-year report.
You wait till the end of the year, all right?
No, I'm just going to touch on a few things. Tom had 2 plant operators reclassified. We had 2 water leaks on College Avenue. Those were 6-inch breaks, which involved putting about 6.5 yards of concrete back in later on. We had a leak on Fayette. We issued 1 boil water for the leak on College Avenue, and it come back good after we sampled it. We completed the fire service for Opportunity House on Madison Street, and where we've been working on West Main, trying to transfer all services from the old 4-inch cast to the 8-inch. That's completed. And I would like to commend the crew because they only had to do 2 cuts in the street, and normally whenever you have to shoot across with a gopher, you try to expose everything. We had some depths from when we was in there before, and they actually got the shots across without digging any extra holes other than 2. So that was a big savings to the water department there. We also went ahead and worked a night shift up the corner of Main and West Main there, because Main and Route 20, I'm sorry, to abandon that 4-inch, which we abandoned when we dug down and cut 4-inch cast T out, and that eliminated 780 foot of potential leaks that's in the street down there on West Main Street. We've got all of our concrete poured back in the streets and sidewalks where we've tore up on West Main and our leaks. We've also done a little bit of blacktopping where we had some tore up that was close to the street. The state requires it to be back a certain time, and the street department had their hands full for the last few weeks, so we went ahead and just done our own blacktop on that. We've changed 45 residential meters. We're still encountering some problems from this winter where we had freeze and it froze enough in the meters that it didn't bust, but now it weakened the bottoms enough that so we've been changing quite a few of those because of that. The other thing I mentioned is we did have the budget submitted to the water board. They're reviewing it and should have an answer, to approve it next meeting. One other thing, I'm going to let Tom talk about this. It's from the AWWA conference where we just come back. We received a reward, but it pertains more to him.
Just spent a few days over Canaan Valley at the AWWA conference. Part of the process they do over there, the protocols, they always have a competition among utilities that show up. One of the competitions they call is a taste test. There's several areas other than just taste. There's taste and smell, there's chemical analysis of the water, clarity, turbidity, and such things like that. But anyway, get through the technical stuff. I'm pleased to report that the City of Buckhannon Water Department placed second among 14 entries. So we're very pleased with our crew and our plate.
Who's underwater?
You sure you want to know that?
Yeah.
West Virginia American. They placed first.
Tastes like licorice.
West Virginia American. But I don't think they had licorice in it. I'm not sure.
News again
Do they have a
tonight.
sewer award too? What's that?
Do they have a sewer competition?
Sewer taste test.
Every time we lose. Just sewer competition. That's all we have now.
Thank you.
Add a little levity.
Congratulations.
Yeah. We make pretty good water in Buckhannon.
We do.
Credit. Dave?
Real quickly, because most of my time will be under ordinances, the Drug Task Force meeting has been moved. It was supposed to have met a couple of weeks ago to June 12. Matt Gregory, Michael Doss, and probably I will all attend that to try to. There is absolutely no guarantee that we will get one penny from the federal government. I want that to be clear. The Sudden Link matter is something that I had asked to be taken up in executive session, but it's not pressing. If the council would rather wait until the next meeting to do that, that would be fine.
Sounds good to me.
The Angus lawsuit, we had a 2-hour discovery session today to review the interrogatories and requests for production of documents of the plaintiff. Kelly Arnold, Jerry Arnold, Michael Doss, Sammy Jenkins, and myself all participated in that and provided the information necessary to respond to all of that information. As you see in your packet, last week the mayor and I and other city officials participated in 2 awards. Last Thursday at Stocker Youth Center was Service to Youth Champion Day. Sam Nolte was our honoree. And last Friday at Friendly Way Day, Wyatt Long, 30 plus years now with our fire department, was honored as the Friendly Way Day honoree. Real quickly, well, I'll wait and put the next map up when we get into the ordinance on Sam's CSX acquisition. That's all I have unless you have questions for me.
Okay, we'll move it along here. Correspondence, you have a zoning for liquor license request from Don Paco's Restaurant and a zoning liquor license request for 3/4 Cafe for your information.
And if you have any objections, I need to know because I'll go ahead and issue those tomorrow.
Is there a footage thing from being close to churches?
Yes, there is. It's 300 feet, but it's by the street. It's not physical distance between buildings, and the Three Forks Cafe does in fact meet it.
What about the other one?
It does as well.
No objection.
Okay, if you have objections, you need to let him know. Consent agenda is minutes of the regular meeting May 1st. Building and wiring permits approval of payment of the bills. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. H1, second and final reading, ordinance 380 on home rule.
Mayor, I'll do this by pretty much caption only. This is ordinance number 380 of the City of Buckhannon, an ordinance authorizing the City of Buckhannon's application for home rule status, including the filing of the city's written home rule plan with the state of West Virginia's Municipal Home Rule Board. We've talked about this the last couple of meetings, first reading last time. Lots of findings, lots of things that can't go in the plan are all identified herein as to what we can't do. An administrative provisions section that says we'll do our annual filing update with the state every year in December. The severability article, the effective date. While this ordinance wouldn't become effective in the city until June 21, Michael is required, I believe, on June 1 or June 2 to have it submitted to Charleston. So if you act favorably upon this evening, he will submit it forthwith. It's my recommendation that the council consider and approve on second and final reading ordinance 380 of the City of Buckhannon.
I move adoption of ordinance 380.
Motion made, is there a second? Second. Motion made and seconded that we approve on second and final reading ordinance 380, which is the home rule ordinance. Discussion? All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Declared unanimous. 381, we've voted to table.
Mayor, 382, I would like to now make 381. There's 2 or 3 references to ordinance 382 to keep our sequence. That would be the only change to this. Let me read it by caption, go through the whereases quickly, and let you peek at the map. Sam can jump in too. Ordinance number 382 of the City of Buckhannon, 381 of the City of Buckhannon. An ordinance authorizing the city's purchase through the city's sanitary board of real estate aggregating approximately 2.77 acres, more or less, and situated west of the corporate limits of the City of Buckhannon in Buckhannon District, Upshur County, from CSX Transportation, Inc., a Virginia corporation. Rather than read all the whereases, if we go out to the Weston Road, out in the neighborhood where Mike Ross's office and Smitty's Suzuki is located, this is the area that we're talking about for purchase by the city that, as Sam indicated under his report, will complement greatly their sanitary sewage planning efforts out there. Sam, you want to speak any further to it?
Well, it actually runs from Red Rock Road. We own the railroad grade out to Red Rock Road currently and have sewer almost to that point. We're short about 1,000 feet. But we've used, we purchased that earlier section in 1997 and have had 3 projects where we installed sewers to reach the Hampton Inn, to reach Rennie's Mobile Home Village, and first to do the Mud Lick sewer, the original Weston Road and Mud Lick sewer project. So it's been very beneficial to us in our efforts to extend sewer service west of Buckhannon. And now we're looking to extend further and had thought it was just too much of a reach to buy more in 1997. It would seem like a long ways out there, but now we're out there. And the part that we're looking at getting is from Red Rock Road out to the Finks Run interchange, which is the next interchange from Red Rock Road. And there's a portion that is not available, but the railroad had reserved utility right away across that portion, and they will transfer at least sewer utility rights to us. So that's the location. We have a lot of interest in providing sewer service. We have inquiry frequently from people out in that area. And not that we're necessarily going to just jump on a project right away, but we had thought at one time that we could extend the sewer out on Old Route 33. Looking at it more carefully, it appears very difficult to do. The road is higher than the adjacent ground. It would make the sewer be very deep. Not sure we get cooperation from the highway department. This is a pretty important acquisition for the sewer department if there's continued interest in extending service.
And then I'm assuming we've run this. The sanitary board is recommending this, and this has been going on for a period of time, and it requires this ordinance by the city for us
Buying
to
property.
acquire property. So it's
State statute.
make the motion.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Move. Go ahead.
I'll second it to ask a question.
You have
I'm
a
assuming
question.
you've examined the nature of CSX's right-of-way across that part. And that
Goes back to
they-
1875 with the
But I mean,
Baltimore and
it's-
Ohio Railroad.
But it's clear that they have the sewer, the right to grant a sewer right-of-way across that track.
The only warranty that the railroad will give, or it gives anybody, is a quit claim deed. But we're satisfied that this is part of their original railroad acquisition, yes.
And so they, at some point, so that red section, they at one point sold that off but retained a utility right-of-way across there?
Yes,
There
that's
actually
correct.
was a swap. They traded some property with Mary Click back in 1957. They owned it previously, sold it off, got it back.
Because the only thing, I mean, I'm not going to vote against the ordinance, I just would, at the point where the extension goes out there, whoever actually owns that property, you know, if they went and said, well, the railroad didn't have any right to give you guys the right to run a sewer line through here, are we in a good, we have good title, or they have good title to that?
The railroad holds title to the property right now.
Even that red section, I thought they just had the right of way across.
The red section, they only had the right of way.
That's
They
the right-
withheld that. They owned the property, sold it, and withheld a right of way across it.
That's the
And
Mike Ross.
we have that deed.
You have that deed?
Yes.
Yeah, we've got a
I
copy.
mean, it's on record in the courthouse.
Yeah,
that
right.
They provided
Yeah.
us a copy as well.
All right, motion made, second. Ready for question? All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Declare that unanimous. Okay. David, you got, that pretty much does that. We got a
Table
request for
Suddenlink.
Suddenlink for temporary easement.
We can table that. There's no rush.
We can table that.
Table.
Motion to table.
No, it's just,
Just pass it.
Just do it.
go on.
The ALPR, we already took care of. Issue regarding electrical inspector approval of his work.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Did we do anything at all that requires him to have an electrical inspector from outside the county to inspect the work that he does?
We haven't done it.
We have talked about that previous, and
This strike me as a conflict of interest.
Well, I think it makes sense to have an independent person comes with it.
I know he's only done one job in the city that he's been the contractor on, but that's one job that he inspected his own work. It's not a good policy for anybody to inspect their own work. And I think we should consider that at some time. I don't know how we take care of it, just by motion or by whatever.
Probably did an ordinance.
Probably would.
Resolution.
I think we need maybe
Director.
a question to the state fire marshal relative to that, and see what the state fire marshal has to say, and I'll try to.
About ethics?
Well, it's an.
You know, there are certain, I used to play around with airplanes a little bit, and there are certain jobs that a mechanic can do on an airplane if he has also his inspector's certificate, he can certify his own work. Not everything, but there are places that even the Federal Aviation Administration allows an inspector to sign his own work as inspected.
And even without being a mechanic, an airplane owner can do
Well, if any of these
it.
houses are going to fly, then I'd say that.
Well, but I'm just saying that the state fire marshal may say that this is acceptable. It might even be in the National Electric Code. I don't know. That
Well, let's do find out
crazy,
then.
Yeah.
Let's, one way or the other, let's find it out.
That's a good question. Yep. You have any other comments?
Only about the fire on Barber Street, the cleanup. How long does it take to clean up a house that's been condemned?
I don't know.
The insurance just cleared it Monday.
Okay.
So it's now up to the owner to,
Does he have a certain time limit?
not that I'm aware of. We try to keep after them, but.
Which house is it?
It's one.
2 doors down from you.
118 or something, 2 or 3 down from me.
The problem that I had, which we have resolved, was he not only wasn't tearing the house down, but he wasn't maintaining the
Cutting grass.
yards, so we got that taken care of.
Wasn't beating the snakes.
Yeah.
Feeding around.
I've seen snakes.
Yeah.
I was wondering about that because some of the neighbors have complained about the smell of the building.
Yeah. I got a call from one of your back door neighbors. And,
About the mowing?
mowing and the smell.
Well, thanks for taking care of the mowing because she thanked me.
I think Rich has been taking care of that pretty well. Tom, you have a comment?
Nothing, just I'm glad I'll be sticking around for a couple more years.
Good. Good. Rich?
Thank you to the voter.
Yeah.
No comments tonight.
John? Pam? Dave?
I've said enough this.
Remember Memorial Day. Keep it
Yes.
holy.